hear a few welcoming words, and I want the audience to meet our first requested. Yes. A participant requested that the live transcription be enabled for the meeting. Can we do this, Eric?
Yes, as a host, you might have gotten a request for that. Did that pop up correctly? Otherwise, let me.
Sure. Okay, good.
Yep, there you go.
There is a kind of distractions. Okay, so I would like to introduce Henri Saval. He is the person why we are here today, because he is the founder of the socioeconomic management. He has numerous credentials and rewards for his work. And yet in 2017, the Ministry of Education, Higher Education and Research of France awarded Henri Saval the very important award, Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. This is the highest reward in France. And this reward reflects his 50-year dedication towards a more humane economy, a more ethical social life, and a more citizen-centered society, both at the national and international levels. So I invite Henri Saval to say a few welcoming words. And Veronique, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ella.
Do you hear us?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes. I remember the first themed conference in the US. It was in Minneapolis in November 2012. The conference was good, but the weather not so much. I told the organizers of the conference that it would be nice to change the season to a warmer one. The second conference took place in April, which was a much better time to come to Minnesota. Now, of course, the conference is online and weather does not matter, but being online does allow for people from several countries to participate. The conference celebrates its 10th anniversary. I cannot believe how quickly 10 years have flown by. The conference changed locations, survived COVID, moved online, and continues to gather researchers, business people, and new learners in the field. Looking back, I can say that we have achieved a lot of success. There are more interveners researchers trained. There are more people who want to use STEAM as their business and life philosophy. There are more leaders who want to make their organizations healthy, human-oriented, and productive. I would say that socioeconomic approach to management has established strong roots on the American soil. While we have achieved some immediate results, we always need to keep in mind the creation of potential. Balance between immediate results and developing potential is an optimal way to grow, and this is why we are here today. Our conferences bring people together to share their individual thoughts and experiences. This sharing helps to build the critical mass and grow the collective human potential. I like being part of this growth and development. Thank you, Ella and John. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. See, if there were in face-to-face, everybody would clap, but now I have to clap for everybody. Thank you, Henri. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you today. Next, welcoming word comes from Bob Hartel, and he is a dean of the Standard School of Business at the College of Saint Scholastica. And he has been with us with the conference also, it feels like forever. Bob, please welcome.
Thanks, Alla. On behalf of the College of Saint Scholastica and our Standard School of Business and Technology, I want to welcome all of you to the 10th Annual International SEAM Conference. As a co-sponsor of the conference for 7 of those 10 years, we're very pleased to work again with the SEAM Institute and ICER in delivering this year's gathering. With guests from 7 different countries and many states here in the US, we know it's going to be another interesting and informative 2 mornings. We're especially pleased to work again with our friends from France, Henri, Véronique Zardet, and Marc Bonnet, and to maintain our collaboration and friendship with Alla and John Conbert at the US SEAM Institute. So welcome to everyone. Enjoy the 2 days. Hopefully one day we'll be able to meet again in person on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And the last board welcoming word comes from another co-sponsor of the conference, the SEAM Institute. And I invite John Conbert to say a few words.
I will do very few. On behalf of SEAM Institute, welcome. Once we met face to face, I miss being able to eat with people, hug them, hug my friends. And I'm aware that online we are able to have a very economical, low cost, widespread conference that's, I think, unique. I don't know of anything else like this. To be able to have people from around the world have time to listen, to talk, to wrestle. We deliberately make time so people can, through the chat, ask any questions you want and have time for presenters to answer. It's very special. So on behalf of SEAM Institute, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, John. So this is an official part of the conference has come to the end, and we have an official start of the 10th annual SEAM conference. Very nice to have you all here. And I'm also aware that many people who join us today have no idea what SEAM means. And so our first presenter will show you a nice and interesting way to understand what SEAM is. I invite Mary Demain, co-founder of the Liminal Edge, a company that has its roots in the SEAM philosophy. And she combines SEAM knowledge and SEAM training with another training of HERA, which is in agility, agile leadership and transitions. So please welcome Mary, you are muted.
Morning, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you can see
Yes.
the presentation.
Yes, and we
So,
start the timing.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Alla. So today I'd like to show some new features on the SEAM Institute's website. It's the SEAM map and the poster. So let's start with the map. So this is what the map looks like, and we're happy to introduce this first version to you. I'd like to thank John and Alla and Sarah Skillman and Brian Irwin for their support in building out this map. So the map was originally inspired by the SEAM book. And our first goal of the map was to capture interest in seeing the entire system of change in SEAM, and along with the perspectives of the interconnections that are resident in SEAM. Secondly, the purpose is to convey the philosophy and the methods behind the concepts that make SEAM work. And third, it's an invitation for you to explore the images and information and the theories and practices that make SEAM unique. So the map is interactive on the website, so you can click on the title of the images to read information behind each of these concepts. So let's start with the biggest area of the map. And that's the whole system change. So this area of the map has 4 items. The trihedron on the top left is where the 3 foci are needed for sustainable change. The intervention foci is then expanded to the picture of the intervention with groups on the right. The intervention starts at the top and cascades through the organization, and that is then connected to the process on the bottom right. The chevrons within that process show how it is intentional and it's prescribed for each group. And the key on the bottom left relays how intervener researchers interact with the groups, providing hope and where the respect for people is love. There's also a pillar holding up 3 of the benefits of SEAM. It teaches social responsibility with a focus on human potential at work and in life. It is evidence-based while building on data from over 2,000 case studies. And it employs systems thinking to improve the systems to work for people and to benefit people. So next we'll look at the outer parts of the map. So the icons on the left represent the overall concepts to understand why SEAM works. Just other methods just don't sustain change like SEAM does. And the first icon is the 4-leaf clover. It represents the relationship, the structures and behaviors, dysfunctions, and hidden costs. And usually when most changes happen in organizations, they miss a couple of the leaves. And so those changes can cause some dysfunctions and therefore have an associated hidden cost. The second icon shows how SEAM views all peoples as actors, as equals without titles. The next icon is the coins that represent the socio and economic sides of the coin. The 2 sides, they cannot be separated, thanks to Henri for this analogy. The fourth icon is the SEAM Institute SEAM has determined that all symptoms lead back to 5 root causes. Human potential describes the SEAM philosophy that human potential is the only source of economic performance. And the last one on the left is the industrial era virus, the TFW virus. So it explains why we're here in the first place and why it is so destructive and what we're trying to do with SEAM. So on the right side of the map, the first icon is about the hidden costs, the things that are not typically on the balance sheet. The mirror effect phase is where the people hear others' perspective, what isn't working as well as it could. The expert opinion is where the experts provide their insights. And management tools are what managers learn during the engagement. And a new item for you is the time investment. This is a guide that we've used a couple of times. It's to help actors, the managers, and the intervener researchers understand their commitment to the engagement. So there's a lot of details behind that icon on the website. And lastly, there's improvements to steering is where people take action to improve their work. Now at the bottom of the page are some foundational items of SEAM, and these things may be new to you as well. The first one is the philosophy, and this is what shapes the SEAM theory. There's 6 concepts behind that link. There's the methodology as a new way of thinking. And then there are some outcomes that describe how SEAM can prepare an organization to unleash human potential. So we hope you take some time to look at the map and are able to use it. And next, I'd like to show you the SEAM poster. So as a companion to the map, this is the first version of the poster for you. So the poster helps to remind us why SEAM is different, and that's the box on the left-hand side. It lists the key parts for the whole system change that we just went through in detail that's on the map. And it kind of serves as a cheat sheet. That's all in the center of the poster. And then on the right-hand side, it reminds us what is needed for transformational change. So this document can be downloaded on the SEAM website. So we hope you take the time to visit the SEAM Institute's website and read all the information behind the map. And you can print a copy of the poster for your office or to share or to email to prospective clients or whoever you're working with. So we'd love to hear your suggestions on how to make the map and poster better. And your feedback is important and appreciated so we can work on the next versions. We'd also like to hear your experience if you have some insights into how it helped you promote SEAM to others. And you can submit your feedback to me at my email address there. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. You
Thank
just,
you.
yeah, ahead of even the time. Very good. So as Mary said, you can go on the seaminstitute.org and under the what is SEAM, something like this, there is a drop down menu, and I saw that Mary Paulson sent to everybody actually a links
Yep.
to that map. Very good. We never said how the conference works. We do not ask questions right away of a specific presenter. We let 3 or 4 people talk, and then we have a panel with our experts where will be a discussion. We allocated more time for a discussion. So it will be actually, yes, Veronique. The only rule that does not apply of 7 minutes is to Henri and Veronique. And so I want just to prepare that Henri has as much time as he needs to cover his material, because material is a new material, and this is a kind of a new creation that Henri and his colleagues and Veronique works on it. So yes, I invite Henri Saval. And
Ella, before you do, we should invite everybody, if they have questions, to use the chat to ask them.
Correct, correct. Please. And I'm just thinking as I am talking, I ask Cheryl, because Cheryl and we are both moderators. So while I'm talking, I cannot read. So I'll ask Cheryl to actually read through the chat, and I will do the same when you talk. Okay, Cheryl? Very good. So you heard who Henri is, the founder of the method, and now Henri Saval is joined by his colleague, Veronique Zardet. She's director of ICOR, which is Institute of Socioeconomic Research for Organizations. She's professor of management in the business school of the University Jean Moulin and they are both up from Lyon, France. Welcome, Veronique. Please unmute yourself. And I want to say to the public, to the audience, the people who never met Henri, I have a term. I coined a term for Henri. I call him the Einstein of management, because he actually created some new ideas that are totally opposite from the mainstream ideas. So please, Henri and Veronique, you can share your screen.
Yes. Do you see the PowerPoint?
We do see the PowerPoint, yes.
Okay, fine. We can start. Vas-y, Henri, tu commences.
In socioeconomic theory, called SEAM, the behaviors of actors are a fundamental variable for understanding the functioning of organizations and the production of socioeconomic added value. This paper focuses on the actors' behaviors, their dynamics, learning as a fundamental lever for the development of human potential, and finally, the concept of ego altruism that we have recently explicated to understand and pilot the processes of socioeconomic change. We hope that in 7 or more minutes, we will be able to give you some key elements on these human behaviors that will make you want to go deeper later. SEAM was designed as a disruptive innovation because it is based on the reconstructive critique of the classical school of organization, which is mainly made up of the theories of Taylor, 1911, Fayol, 1916, and Weber, 1924. The numerous experiments carried out by ISEO researchers have shown that managerial innovation is found in movement, a kind of organizational bracing which consists of continuously and reflexively improving the quality of management and the conditions of working life. One of the key success factors of socioeconomic intervention in the development of the analytical and thinking capacity of the actors on the field. The whole revert design, horizontal and vertical, of the socioeconomic intervention makes it possible to move from resistance, including good resistance, to individual and collective adaptation of people, resilience.
So change appears as a process of individual and collective learning according to the results of ISEO intervention researches. Thus, life is a learning process and all human action has a learning component that underpins the notion of ordinary and recurrent learning, the essential mechanism of experimentation. The team's manager conductor has a facilitating role in the concert of assembling the bits of knowledge and competencies of each musician. The achievement of quality and volume, that is to say, productivity of activities, does not imply that the manager conductor has all the skills necessary for the team's activity. The process of organizational metamorphosis develops when one is able to pick up signals of variation in the functioning of the organization. We have identified 4 progressive and cumulative levels of positive impact that is generated in actors: the discourse, the decisive actions, the output of their actions, and the mental and cognitive representations that will generate new behaviors. In-depth observation thus reveals that the operational actors acting and witnessing are therefore endowed with a hidden economic and financial power. This explains the important role of close managers at all levels of the organization chart: a general manager with a director with a head of department, a head of department with a supervisor with a technician, and so on. The recycling of dysfunctions and hidden costs needs contradictory intersubjectivity led by each manager. A key condition is the improvement of performance of inter-individual cooperation within teams and inter-team cooperation within the organization, as it feeds the value chain. Cooperation is the basis of the principle of cognitive interactivity, a concept proposed by SIM to define knowledge as a cognitive spark composed of bits of knowledge resulting from the interaction in proximity of 2 actors or 2 teams. According to this principle, knowledge is not a particle possessed by one person or team, that he or she strives to transfer to another person or team. It is a wave-like phenomenon produced by interaction because knowledge is co-produced by the interaction between two actors or teams at least. The traditional pattern of some competent actors training others is replaced by the principle that all actors are involved in a learning process where cooperation and not competition plays a very effective and efficient role. Learning, thus extended, no longer appears as the repair of a lack of skills, but as a vital breathing of the actors simultaneously and alternatively in action and in thought.
Ego altruism is a fairly new concept of CM, which designates the key dialectical relationship between egoism and altruism, which constitutes a fundamental explicative hypothesis of human behavior, of its dynamics and its evolution in short, medium, and long terms. Ego altruism is also an observed and observable phenomenon. On the contrary, the traditional dichotomy between egoism and altruism seems to be an imposture of the mind, a caricature, and therefore an obstacle to the subtle understanding of human behavior. The split qualification, egoism versus altruism, should thus constitute a serious conceptual error. The observed actors' behaviors The observed actors' behaviors in organizations reveal sometimes egoistic aspects of individuals and groups, alternating with altruistic aspects. The graphic shows a cursor which moves over time between the two poles of attraction, egoism and altruism. Example, contradictory or antinomic judgments of certain actors on others at a few hours, days, or months intervals. Another example, the resistance to change fluctuates and results in contrasting phases. First, opposition to the innovative action, followed by a second phase of carrying out the action of change, and then a phase of conscious adherence to the innovation in progress, at last perceived as beneficial. If we refer to the natural behaviors of the individual, namely intelligent, actor, strategist, disobedient, and amnesiac, the ego-altruism concept contributes to understand how these different behaviors combine at a given moment and over time. This concept is placed at the geometric heart of the graphic. Managing an activity or a team should consist in influencing the dialectical movement of the cursor between egoism and altruism. The manager's role is to discover here and now, by successive trial and error, so-called heuristic process, the point of balance of the ego-altruistic interest of the different team members or partners involved in this activity. Each space thus managed, stimulated by the ego-altruistic interest, will thus negotiate with the other management spaces.
And the conclusion? In all our interventions in very small, medium-sized companies and organizations, we have observed the crucial role of behaviors in the dynamics of SIM. Managers have a key and a new role to play. Conductor to learn the musicians to play together, to develop their skills, their energy, and their cooperating behaviors. Cooperation is anything but natural, and yet it is extremely effective for social and economic development. We hope to publish in a depth text on ego altruism soon. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Henri and Veronique. And we will be looking forward to reading that material on ego altruism. What a wonderful new concept. Once again, if you have your questions, you put it in the chat or you hold it until our panel discussion. And I'm going to introduce our next presenter. And what a nice thing to go right after Henri and Veronique. So I'm inviting a DBA student from the University of Balamand who is doing here a DBA project using the SIM approach, Adel Jamaluddin. So please welcome. And Adel, I don't see you.
Hello.
Yes, now I see you. Thank you. I see you. And you have 7 minutes.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Don't start counting. Let me share my
don't.
screen.
No. People prepare and then we will start.
Okay,
You
can you
tell me
see my
when you're
screen
ready.
now? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do see. Are you ready?
Hello, everyone. My name is Adel Jamaluddin. I'm a second-year DBA student at the University of Balamand and Isayor. And today I'll be presenting how SIM enhanced the implementation of Project Management Office or PMO at the Tripoli Container Terminal. Let's meet the terminal. Okay. This is a build, operate, and transfer project from the Lebanese government for a period of 25 years. It was fully acquired by CMA CGM Group on October 2021, and it's the date. Luckily, it's the date when we kicked off the intervention. It's the second biggest container terminal in Lebanon after the capital's main port, Beirut. And it's important to note that the terminal witnessed rational changes at the level of executive management. Since October 2022, 3 chief executive officers were changed, and at the level of operations, also many operations managers have changed. Why did I choose Project Management Office? I come from a background of Project Management Office work for around 8 years. And for me, project management serves as an internal body, like a permanent consultant. It's an intermediary between the senior management and the project management team, regardless of the sector we're dealing with, in case it's construction, IT, container terminal, or any other sector. I see it as an integrated mechanism to run tasks in a more effective and efficient manner. I saw similarities between PMO and SIM, and this is why for me it was a promising journey. I see SIM as an important methodology or philosophy that values the human behavior. And for me, when implementing PMO, there will be an ability to create this interaction between organizational structures and employees' behaviors. PMO definitely needs the human intervention, and this is where SIM and PMO can cooperate together for the benefit of the company. We kicked off the intervention on October 2021. It was an integral diagnosis, 53 team members. And we extracted these functions after having interviewing those teams. We presented them in mainly these dysfunctions per team were the absence of training, no specific procedures, lack of communication, lack of means of strategic implementation. There were no safety in the workplace. There were time management issues. We gathered them in an expert review, and we presented them to the management, the executive management. We also perceived the unvoiced comments like the lack of motivation. Some employees were concerned, other employees, they were not used to the new management style. And we presented our recommendation that there should be a next step for the management to move further and implement a well-defined action plan. The management was very cooperative. We started immediately by grouping our basket of ideas. We initiated a priority action plan, and we started with the project initiation. The management wanted to prioritize two main dysfunctions that were first the logistics problem, because the trucks were taking up to 10 minutes. Every truck was taking up to 10 minutes to finalize the paperwork at the gate of the port. And the other problem was that the CEO was wasting almost 4 hours of his day signing papers and micromanaging the tasks. The first hidden cost was calculated to approximately $17,160. The second one was $10,500 each per year. And this is where the rise of project management at the terminal began. The management saw that there is a new need to establish a new department under the name of Project Management Office. The main tasks were to support the SEAM projects that were being implemented and provide assistance in planning, scheduling resources, and creating strategic portfolio management. It consisted of 3 people. One of them was hired as a full-time PMO, so the department was created, and the project started. 2 main projects started. The first one was to rearrange the logistics gate. It was civil works, and it cost $14,300. The result was we were able to reduce the wait time from 10 minutes to 3 minutes per truck. It resulted in an economic balance of $2,340. The second project was obtaining the ISO certification 9001-2018. The trainings and everything that came along cost us $7,480. The result was reducing the time to 1 hour, the CEO interface with the management, and it allowed the CEO to concentrate on macro management instead. The economic balance was $200. Several ongoing projects are being executed now by PMO. We are currently building an engineering workshop. We're working on obtaining an integrated management system, 14001-2018. We're setting manpower, yard planning, equipment utilization strategies. We're preparing training matrices for employees. And SEAM initiation at the port had several positive effects. Employees now realize that they are an important factor in the company. Their concerns are heard. Many promotions happened at the level of the company. Our safety manager is now the QHSSE manager. We have the new PMO department. It has the trust of both employees and executive management. And the company executive management is now looking for projects that serve for the continuous improvement and cost reduction at the level of the terminal. Thank you.
Thank you, Adele. Wow, you had 6 minutes, so you just finished your presentation in 6 minutes. Thank you. Was very nice. And now we will have a panel, and I introduce our panel experts. It's Mel Sullivan, the Chief People Officer for Acumen Senior Living in Minnesota, and Patrick Carmi. He is a psychologist at My Health for Teens and Young Adults in Minnesota. So Patrick and Mel, I suggest you start your discussion, and we will, we have 17 minutes for the panel.
Okay, well, thank you for that nice introduction, Ala, and for the very nice and informational presentations we've had so far this morning. One thing that struck me about the initial presentation of the overview of the SEAM map was sort of the introduction of new concepts we haven't really seen before, especially when we look at the key. I think part of the key sort of incorporated something, a spiritual aspect, talking about how absolute respect equals love. And so one thing we wanted to delve more into with Mary is, how do these concepts, these sort of revolutionary concepts, how are these accepted by traditional business practitioners? And is there, when we look through a cultural lens, is there fertile ground for this, places where this is more easily adopted? And are there some cultures that sort of hold their hand up and say, gee, this is so foreign that other types of preparation are needed first before we can introduce some of these principles?
Yeah, I think in practice, what we've noticed, and this is Brian Irwin, Sarah Skillman, and myself in doing our interventions, is that it really starts with us and how we respect the actors when we're actually doing interventions. And so if it starts with us, people feel more comfortable explaining where the dysfunctions are in the organization. We've heard from people that this was the first time that they've heard their voice has been heard in 7 years. And we also heard from people that when we actually presented the known D back to them, the things that were not said, that we were spot on. We actually hit on what they were feeling as they were working in the organization. So in that regard, it was the way we were intervening with the system and bringing that respect to everybody. From a management system, I think it was a little, I'm looking for the right word. I think they were a little bit tenuous because they hadn't experienced it before in the organization. It was basically driven by transactions instead of respecting people and how they felt about the work that they were doing.
Mm.
So Sarah and Brian, you can jump in here too if you have other things to add.
Well, Mary Patrick and I were chatting about this, and love is not a typical word. I know that you hear in corporate America or corporate anywhere. I know John's going to be talking about that tomorrow a little bit.
Right.
We were curious about how do you bring that forward. You explained it well. It was something that we just were pondering about. How do you talk about that more openly?
Right. And using the word respect does seem to resonate. And you're right, love is not necessarily thought of in the workplace. It's very rare that people bring it up. But I think that with just showing how we interact is going to kind of help build that bridge between this is what love looks like when you treat people with respect, and it can happen in organizations.
Thank you. And we wanted to shift a little bit then from that to Henry and Veronique and ask you, when you think about the managers of how you're trying to change the actors within an organization, and building off Mary's comments about love. Love is not a typical way that you accelerate into a management position in most typical organizations. And so Patrick and I were curious around how do you help managers keep that ego altruism in a way that helps them support the actors around them so that they can be successful and build off the SEAM concepts?
I think you're muted.
I think that the concept of ego altruism helps the managers to understand why there are so many dysfunctions and hidden costs. And to help the managers to understand and to use this concept and to change their practices, we don't speak directly about ego altruism. We speak and we use diagnosis, the socioeconomic diagnosis through the interviews, the dysfunctions, hidden costs, the mirror effect, the expert opinion, in order to show that many dysfunctions can be reduced through new behaviors from managers and from all the actors, staff, managers, middle managers, top managers, and the change process, which was very well explained by Mary's presentation, is a journey which helps to move from a bigger egoism in the practices to a new mix between egoism and altruism in the practices of the managers and of the staff. And not totally for philosophical reasons, but also to improve the functioning and to reduce, for example, the turnover, the absenteeism, the lack of involvement of people.
That's very helpful to understand. And another thing that Mel and I were really seized upon is this concept of cooperation versus competition. And one thing that struck us is, especially in the American culture and to a degree in some Asian cultures, competition is rewarded by raises, by promotions, and cooperation usually isn't rewarded. So we were wondering, in regard to how a manager should act and transform their leadership style to encourage cooperation over competition, what are some of the skills that can be deployed to sort of make that transformation, which seems unnatural?
You are muted, Veronique. Veronique, you're muted.
We have also this kind of system and rewarding in European companies, in French companies. I think it's quite the same answer. I think that dysfunction and hidden costs help to understand that the lack of cooperation, the silos constitute and the virus, especially the virus which separates missions, activities, processes, explain a lot of dysfunction and hidden costs. We have analyzed that more than 53% of hidden costs are generated by the virus phenomenon. TFW, not COVID, TFW virus. So, SIM process helps the managers to analyze their rewarding processes and start to change, it's not very quick because there are processes at the level of companies. But the using SIM helps to change some criteria of performance and to introduce new criteria such as working cooperation. For example, I have a very concrete example. When we have a lot of work in a department and in the other department near the first, people don't have a lot of work. So how to encourage cooperation, but also development of competencies between both departments in order to develop cooperation, then to reduce the silos and to improve at the same time the economic performance, because we don't need to recruit additional people in the first department when in the second department people have less work. And finally, some economic criteria such as hourly contribution, which is an economic criteria that we help each company to measure each month. That is the value added per hour worked and at the level of a company. So to use and to combine local criteria, economic criteria with whole and global criteria at the level of the company can help to change and to introduce the reward of cooperation and to reduce, progressively, the reward of competition.
Okay, so it sounds like first bringing the competence level of any particular leader or manager in the organization is key, and then empowering that person to reward cooperation over competition would be the end goal. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. How are we doing on time, Ala?
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, then we wanted to quick switch onto Adele. And so one thing that Mel and I were really sort of fixated upon is the explosion in the Beirut port in 2020. And we wondered, you know, how an unexpected event can sort of throw a wrench in these beautiful plans of transformation using SEAM concepts. It seemed like an extraordinary difficulty. And then when you layer on top of that a currency crisis and a political crisis, we were just wondering how how those rough waters can be navigated during such a deep cultural shift.
Yes, actually, I recall when this incident happened, sadly, back on August 4th, everyone expected that the level of the volume of operations will shift from Beirut terminal to Tripoli terminal where we're operating, but unexpectedly, we are. It's very sad to say that we are people who adapt to all the difficulties that we have. We are resilient. The port stopped the operations only for 5 days, and then we resumed back, especially at the container terminal level, because the ship-to-shore cranes that are the main equipment that a port need to rely on in order to operate, they weren't heavily affected, only 2 or 3 out of 18. So the port resumed back to work only 5 days after the incident. However, for us, back then, I think if SIEM was implemented, they would have been able to operate at the level internally at the level of management way faster, because it took them some time. And now after the incident, the Beirut Container Terminal is now fully acquired again by CMA CGM Group after this incident. So CMA CGM Group, which is a French company, by the way, is now operating fully in Lebanon through both ports.
Okay, very good. And then I noticed that you denoted the savings in dollars, and I was wondering if you did that because of any type of hyperinflation in the Lebanese currency.
Yeah, back in 2019, October 2019, $1 was equivalent to 1,500 Lebanese pounds. As of today, $1 is equal to 30,000 Lebanese pounds. So we value everything in US dollars because it's easier to measure for us.
Right. Okay, very good. That's what I suspected. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, you know, condolences for what happened. We sort of saw that here and weren't sure what was happening, how it happened, if they ever got to the bottom of it. But another curveball, and I think it speaks to the, you know, resiliency in general to overcome something again so severe.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we had some discussion. Basically, it was questions, cues and questions were. We hope we'll have more rich discussions on the next panel. And I noticed we do have Mel and Patrick look at the chat. There is a question from a participant from the audience, and see if we can incorporate that in the next panel. We will have 3 more people, and then we'll have a longer discussion. I would like to introduce Chato Hazelbaker, and he is a president of the Northland Pioneer College in Arizona. Many years ago, he was writing his doctoral dissertation on the topic of TFW virus. And it looks like he keeps adding to this body of knowledge of TFW virus, and all his research is revolving around this interesting topic. So welcome, Chato. And while I was introducing him, he was so good and he already put everything on the screen. You want
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm just trying to, I was just trying to do one thing.
Presentation format, yeah. Presenting. It is down there on the bottom.
There we go. Great, thank you so much. So the first thing I want to start by saying is that I approached this presentation with a great amount of humility, because a year ago I presented on what I thought was an emerging COVID topic. And frankly, I think everything that I said was wrong. The actual experience of the virus proved to be very, very different. So there's quite a bit of humbleness that I approached this topic today. So when I did my dissertation, I did it specifically around the TFW virus, and I did it specifically looking at evidence for the TFW virus in a manufacturing facility. And as I've thought about managing during COVID over the past year, I really asked myself the question, has the pandemic response been exacerbated by the TFW virus, or in some ways, are we better? Have we somehow overcome a bit of the TFW virus through the way that we've managed through COVID? Unfortunately, I'll give you the punchline right now. I actually think that the COVID virus, in the way that organizations have managed it, to a great extent, have very much exacerbated the TFW virus and actually embedded it and made it worse. So very quickly, the TFW virus, management ideology is largely based on the interpretation of 3 proponents of scientific management. And at least 2 of these names came up in earlier in the presentation from ICOR. So Taylor, Fayol, and Weber. And really, the way that I think about this conceptually is that the way that the academic world should work, or the way that learning should work, is that you have research that leads to education, that then leads into practice. And then in a perfect world, you actually have a loop back to practice leading to further research. What happens in the area of management is that management, the research happened by Taylor, Fayol, and Weber. They were some of the first individuals that really, that's the foundational. So some of it was research, some of it was just writing. Then that research though was flawed. There are flaws in the way that research was originally done. There are flaws in some of the ideas. That doesn't mean that those are bad people. It just means that those ideas haven't been explored maybe as fully or grown today. But so that flawed ideology gets into the education, the way that we teach management, which then affects the way that we practice. So essentially you have this virus that is, the way to think about it is the way we think about management is fundamentally flawed because of the foundations of what went into management. So if you're going to see evidence of the TFW virus, what you're going to see is three key things. This is first, you're going to see depersonalization or dehumanization and submission. Individuals who are giving away their needs to the organization and really trading their freedom for work. And so dehumanization, depersonalization, and submission, that's the first thing that you're going to see. The second thing that you're going to see is you're going to see an aristocratic view of the organization, a separation of the menial tasks from the noble tasks that leads to artificial hierarchies, right? Some hierarchies are useful, but there's some hierarchies that are frankly not useful. So think about, just very quickly, think about this. Think about over the past 50 years in America, how far CEO salaries have gotten from your average worker salary. You know, it used to be a couple times salary was the standard. Now you have factors of 100, 1,000 times, you know, the lowest paid employee. Apathy, and you see this in workers, this is where TFW really shows up in workers and in managers, is apathy, a lack of interest in work, and this really comes from a lack of hope. And then separation, and I think the presentations this morning already did a nice job of talking about. So for instance, I was struck in the container facility talking about one of the things that they really found that they corrected through SEAM was separations, really walls between different areas of the organization, and then a real hyper specialization. So if that's the evidence of the TFW virus, how is that shown up in our response to COVID? So 2 years of pandemic work, what I would say is that I was shocked to do a quick literature search and find that there's already researchers that are actually have done some pretty good work around what is happening with work in the pandemic. And so this quick quote really I just thought was interesting. It was about an Italian supermarket staff during COVID, and 32% of the respondents having symptoms of severe burnout and 41% of the symptoms of exhaustion and cynicism. So now, and really, if you read that study, what you're really reading is that particularly those people that were workers that we called essential workers really did during this period of time. The treatment that they received was very depersonalizing. And so that is one thing that I would say that definitely showed up and got worse during the pandemic. The other point that I would make is the aristocratic view, and I don't have any specific research on this, but I think if we think through our experience, the whole concept of an essential worker is essentially a moment of sort of thinking about the aristocratic view. So I don't mean to overstate this, but I only have 7 minutes. But so think about this very simply, right? If I'm a worker who's a tech worker who can sit in my apartment fairly well surrounded by people, but then I have somebody delivering my food to me, right? So you have this aristocratic view of work. Apathy, again, another good survey has come out. As a survey indicated, employed parents indicate the compound pressures of working while parenting, including remote schooling and working, has left many citing feelings of apathy and fatigue. If anything, during COVID, the Great Resignation, burnout, all of those things went up significantly, which is a sign of the TFW virus. And finally, separation. So some of the sample headlines, so frankly, I am a little bit tired of reading about how every company needs to have remote work, and any manager that wants their people to come back to their actual location is somehow creating management malpractice. I think that conversation is much more nuanced, but just look at what the headlines were: how to keep home and work separate while working remotely. That certainly doesn't talk about the love and the cohesion of people that we talked about earlier. Another headline: the importance of separating work and personal life in a remote environment. Not indicating that those things might not be nuanced conversations that we want to have, but one of the things that we really have done is we've really increased our separation. I would say that the inability to give John a hug today is an example of the fact where there's a lot of things that are wonderful about remote work, but there's also things that we need to overcome. And if we're not careful, the TFW virus tells us that that separation is fine, when in fact it's very counter to our productivity. So a couple of references there that will be in the slides when they go out. Those two studies that I referenced, my dissertation is linked there, as well as my contact information if you have any particular questions about how we're thinking about this currently.
Mhm.
So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Just perfect timing, Chatter. Very good. Okay, just reminding that when you hear this gong, this sound, it's that you have 1 minute left. So try to wrap up in 1 minute. I want to introduce our next speaker is Catherine Blivermont from Lyon, France, and she is Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior and HRM in the Business School of Jean Moulin University. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Ala. Thank you very much. And I'm sharing here the presentation. Is it okay? Is it okay? Do you see it?
Yes, it's okay.
Well, so hello to everybody.
You didn't put it in a presenter mode. Do you want a presenter mode?
Yes, but I did it on my screen. Doesn't it work?
No, we just see the whole thing. It's not a presentation mode yet.
I have it on my screen, so maybe I have to change. If you're not, I have to change with the PDF, with my PDF presentation. We checked presse finale here. Do I have time for this? Oh my God.
It's okay, relax. So let's just look through this. You just keep talking.
Presse finale, sim conference. Should be like this. And now, I'm sorry. Écran partagé. This one. Does it work like this?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
What do you see? For me, it's not very convenient because I just have. Do you see one slide or?
Yes.
Can I try? I'm sorry. Can I try the other one again?
Catherine, just go here.
Just go. Okay, like this. Okay.
Like this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this philosophers I choose to present you today developed thinking ahead of their time, but they were mostly ignored. And here I try to understand why. So you have Simone Weil. She was a French philosopher who applied to be a worker at the lowest level in a firm, which is rare actually. And she did the job during 2 years in 1934, 1935. She wanted to study the link between mass production and liberty. And she experienced it in her body that, as she said, as it is written, the worst in this condition is not suffering in a hard job, but the humiliation caused by a manual work. And Herbert Marcuse here, he was a German philosopher who denounced the unequal character of the dirty glorious ones and capitalism. He criticized material productivity, which leads personal life to fall back on uniform lifestyles. According to him, mass consumption alienates more than it frees. And also Ivan Illich, an Austrian philosopher, Actually, first he was a priest and then philosopher, also criticizing mass consumption and the industrial society. And he developed the idea of counterproductivity, explaining that a car is driving actually slower than a bike when we are looking, not only because of traffic jam, but also according to the time spent to find money for its funding and the time lost by suffering of pollution. And at least Marshall Salins, an anthropologist first and then philosopher, who demonstrated that the so-called primitive society is not a destitute society as we used to think, but an affluent one, because affluence means producing and consuming only what is needed. And in such societies, the notion of need in a marketing sense is ignored. Consequently, the societies are not based on profitability, not because they are not able to do it, but because they don't want it. It's meaningless for them. So all of them made a critique of the paradigm that promotes the free markets without social and environmental responsibility, increasing organizational profit on the expense of employees' needs and lives, westernization, implementing a Western mindset in cultures not suited for this mindset, total marketization of natural resources and human beings, and over consumption at the source of reduced freedom and which increased addiction. And so they analyze the belief in unlimited economic progress, which is not sustainable. If we will need 3 or 4 planets, maybe more, to continue this way. They also analyzed that they also said it's meaningless to build objects and products that destroy human people at the end. And they explained that this material society creates a feeling of unhappiness actually for human being, because the fundamental desire for human being is our transcendental desire for good. And capitalism has an unequal and totalitarian character. And they were not listening because they critiqued the capitalism as a system for living. But now we are facing, we are at the verge of extinction and needs to do something. And one possible track could be the degrowth paradigm. Degrowth paradigm based on the notion of frugality. Frugality, that's a voluntary control of its consumption. Not a voluntary poverty. It doesn't mean choosing a miserable life, but a life based on qualitative values, not quantity, in order to have time to taste other benefits of life and not just buying and consuming. Actually, it's an ancestral value that we can find in cultures like the Asian culture with the Buddhism, religion Buddhism, and Zen. And the notion of Zen. And of course, in this case, we are ignoring the notion of productivity. We have famous illustrations of people making this choice, like Gandhi and the American Thoreau, who was graduated from Harvard, and he chose when all the other graduates were going to entering the business life, he chose a life in the wild and this voluntary poverty way of living. So I think that it's time to reinvent our way of living with the lessons of these earlier thinkers. And you may think it's utopia, or we cannot go a step back to the past. That's not possible, but actually it's not that. Whether neither a step back to the past nor an utopia. It's just thinking about cooperation, about communities, about common good, about having meaningful work, meaningful life, and probably also thinking about love the humanity, love the planet we are living on, but we have just one. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Catherine. You a great timing and very interesting presentation. And please stay here, stand by for the panel, but we will move to our next presenter and the last presenter for this session, for session 1, Pierre El-Haddad. And he is probably, I also remember, he always joins our conferences, always with interesting material. He is assistant professor of management in St. Joseph University in Beirut, Lebanon. He is also a SIEM intervener researcher, and he had his PhD in Lyon, right, from ECOR. So welcome, Pierre.
Thank you, Ala.
Katrin, stop share. Oh, no. Okay, stop. You stop. I apologize. That's my fault.
I'm trying to. Anyway, thank you, Ala. It's in fact my 6th year.
6th year at the conferences. Okay.
At the conference. Yes, how time flies. Please bring us back to Duluth.
Yes. You have a presenter's mode there. Do you want to click on the presenter's mode down there?
The bottom
The bottom
is,
to the, yes.
Yes. So yes. So, can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can.
All right. So my presentation is about improvisation. In fact, improvisation is something that managers hate. It's managers are about plans, about controlling the organization. A wise man once said that in science, you need to understand the world, but in business, you need the others to misunderstand it in order to gain your competitive advantage. And this is where managers and management in general misunderstood the world. For them, managing is about controlling. Managing is about subordination. Management is about plans, log frames, KPIs. Well, guess what? When COVID hit, nobody had expected it. When the war in Europe erupted, nobody has expected it. All these disruptions in the supply chains, all this explosive inflation, nobody had expected them. They had plans for something else. When these crises hit, nobody had plans for them. And the companies that fared the best are the ones that were less TFW, the ones that devolved powers to the lower levels, the one that permitted the lower levels of the company to improvise. Well, the world where we live is a world of unknown unknowns. What kind of crisis will we face in the future? How soon will we face these crises? What kind of change will we need? These are questions from the realm of the unknown unknown. Already the knowns unknowns. How much inflation, how much cost, how much disruption in the supply chain. These are complex problems, but the unknown unknowns are wicked problems. And if you want to understand the difference between complexity and wickedness, you have John Conbert to ask him these questions. He's the expert. Now, for companies to master their destiny, not to be victims of the fate, they have to adopt another way of management. They have to adopt a management style that is based on human potential, that is based on devolving the wisdom, the power, the decision-making to all levels of the organization. It's not about the leader. It's about the dispersed leadership throughout the organization. So how can they go about it? They have to foresee what in SIEM is called strategic vigilance, picking up the vibrations of change to come, separating noise from phenomena and making sense of them, to proact on insurgent information. And whenever crisis hit, whenever you do not have time to think, to make plans, you have to be able to improvise. Improvisation as defined by planning and acting simultaneously. Well, foreseeing, proacting, improvising are the three stalwarts of a survivable business. And all three of them, they are the degrees of freedom, different degrees of freedom of the same principle, the human potential. So how does improvisation play out within the canons of scene? How much disobedience will we allow the people? How much steering should we impose? How much structure should we put, and how much agency should we allow? How much order should we put? How much constraints should we put on people? It's a balancing act. It's about the quality of management. It's not about the traits of the leader. It's about, again, dispersed leadership. It's about leadership within the organization. And the other canons of theme, thinking like doers and doing like the thinkers. And then taking decisions, entrepreneurial decisions, as opposed to the indecision. All these are a balancing act. How much disobedience? Too much disobedience is chaos. Too much steering is TFW. Too much structure is TFW. Too much agency, it's chaos. So it's a balancing act. And in order to understand where is the right balance, you have an amazing tool, an amazing artifact in SEAM, which is the hidden cost. So use it. And here's where I lay my case.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. And I invite again Mel and Patrick, and you have 20 minutes for a panel discussion.
Thank you, Ala. And Patrick, as always, I'll look forward to partnering with you. Wow, a lot of good information there. Pierre, I can't tell that you're enthusiastic about this at all. But I know that there's a lot of people that are super curious about the things that were shared. And so we would love to hear your questions as well. But Chano, my question is for you, because I remember that presentation around the virus, comparing COVID and the TFW virus. And none of us knew what we didn't know at the time, right? But it also required us to be very top. I mean, for all of us, when we had to make decisions, it required us to make a lot of decisions from the top down, very hierarchical, so that we could keep people safe. And that, I think, deployed more of the TFW virus based on some of the previous conversations. How do you think, or what do you think, based on some of your research currently, or any of you, that we're going to be able to extract ourselves from that kind of thinking and that thinking process, because COVID sort of required us to have that kind of thinking?
Yeah, so I think this is very difficult, because I know even looking at the numbers today, we're not, you can't say that we're past it, right? So there's no we're over end date. So last year when I gave my presentation, the one concept that I gave that I think still really is helpful is that optimism on this particular topic is foolish, but you need to have a sort of an unwavering belief that you're going to succeed. So I think as a manager and a leader, I think the one thing that we should do right now is, even though the pandemic isn't over, whatever the new normal that we're moving into, I think we should take the opportunity to call this a reset. I think we should call it what it is and take the time to intentionally put processes in place where we heal, have discussions, and really very, very specifically call out the TFW virus in our organizations. So the same way that if you had COVID, and I at one point I took the COVID test, and the line shows up and you have COVID, and now you have to make a plan. We need to take that moment as like, so we've taken the test, our TFW virus test is positive. Now let's dig into that conversation and call it what it is. Honor the fact that yes, many of these decisions did have to be top down because of where we were at, but we're going into some sort of a new future. Let's take the time, the short period of time that we need in the middle to get to really dig into and call out this conversation. make this the time that your organization has a really hard conversation about the new normal. And I would say remote work is one of those things that in my context on the campus, the college that I lead is one of those things that we're doing. It's changed everything. So let's dig into the principles around that, but let's call out the TFW virus for what it is.
One thing that struck me during the pandemic was the different values that were sort of put forward in managing lockdowns. For instance, some people had the value of protecting health and protecting workers, and then staying away from workplaces was advised. And then all of a sudden we started seeing these widespread demonstrations to open the economy, which was sort of a different value, maybe, you know, having productivity higher than public welfare. And I felt that was pretty interesting. And I just wondered, you know, what does that mean for society? What does that mean for particular businesses? I think we saw, you know, sort of a devastation of small and medium-sized businesses during the lockdown, and a lot of that was absorbed by sort of the bigs. And so there are sort of some tectonic shifts that blew through the pandemic area, where the bigs got bigger and the medium and small sort of got decimated. And I just don't know, you know, what that means for our society in general. But what do you make of these different value sets, and how do you see this panning out for the future?
Yeah, I don't know how to talk about this in an international context, but I know in the American context, it seems to me like our biggest problem right now is we pretend like we don't live in a world where two things can both be true, that you either have to open the economy or you have to keep people safe. I think the challenge for managers, I think that is a symptom of the TFW virus, where you think that things either have to be. I think Pierre did a really nice job in saying that, you know, managers hate it when, you know, people are having to make decisions on the fly when they're using their agency, right? So we live in a world where two things can be true. I can need to feed my family, so I have to go to work, and I also don't want to bring the COVID virus home, and I don't want to get sick, right? Any good manager is going to have to find a way to navigate where both of those things can be true. And that's good negotiation, right? So then you can negotiate things in the middle. But I think that one of the things that COVID did that was really difficult is it made us, it presented a lot of false dichotomies. And I think in the workplace, that's something we're going to have to talk about. So in my current context, I work with a lot of highly diverse, very low socioeconomic students. They don't do well in traditional online learning, right? So on one hand, yes, we need to provide more remote options. On the other hand, our job is to get them degrees, and we can't get them degrees if they're fully online because they're not successful in that environment. Both of those things can be true. We can keep students safe and we can get them to a degree. And so I think as managers, we have to just remember that we live in that world. And I think that both Eric and Dave's comments in the chat are really helpful.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Please put your, any questions, any comments, any thoughts as you're kind of formulating them in the chat, and I'm sure Ala and John will share those with us at the conclusion of the conference as well, because it does challenge your thinking, and that I think is being in the industry I'm in. There's crisis fatigue as well, and that is real for many people, and it's hard to make a decision. I think, Pierre, something you said that Patrick and I noticed in the, I'd love to talk to John, by the way, about this difference between unknown versus wickedness. You'll have to share more about that in the, I would love to know more. But Pierre, when you mentioned, and I think Chado is referring to it as well, around managers having to control things, right? And you're saying to let the lower levels improvise, but even that language in and by itself, they don't always know how, like Chado just inferred or referred to people not being able to always have the tools in order to do that. And so Patrick and I were chatting about how is it that how do you see that happening? How do you see people being able to be able to make decisions, and how do managers learn not to control when so much of what their job performance relates to being able to do that?
Well, this is a tough call, certainly. And this is why managers and management education resort to easier theories, the TFW theories or the social theories. Both of them are easier. There you have love, and there you have toughness. In fact, finding the right middle, tough love, also begs the question, how much tough and how much love? How to do that? Of course, SEAM is one of the theories that could answer this question. There is not one answer that fits all companies. It's about transmitting this habit of listening to your people, considering them as intelligent as you are, making sense of the different ideas that pop up in your organization, and then acting on them while measuring everything. Measurement, hidden costs. These are awesome tools. Few management theories have such effective measurement tools that will tie the quantitative with the qualitative. So, of course, if you're asking, I'm preaching to the choir, or you're asking someone who's biased. Yes, socioeconomic approach and the accompanying the managers, transmitting this knowledge to them in order for them to be able to find the right balance, to devolve, to collect the wisdom from their organization and to devolve the powers throughout the organization. This is the answer. And it's not easy to find. It's a whole process. It's a learning process. Did I answer the question?
You did. But even the word itself infers that that's what they're supposed to do. So just by using the word manager, we're inferring that they have to manage something.
They have to assume it. Yes, they are managers. Yes, they are leaders. But what kind of managers? What kind of leaders? Leaders are everywhere in the organization, and the managers are everywhere in the organization. You don't manage yourself only. You manage your relation with your peers. You manage your. We're all managers. We're managing something all the time.
Thank you.
I would add, even earlier referring to what Henri and Veronique were saying, you even need to manage your own egoism and your own altruism, because it's always about balancing and managing kind of the sweet spot.
Well, and managing, what your own workload is, managing if you're going to be cooperative or competitive, managing, noticing what needs to be done in the other department. It's just, people have a certain degree of self-management as well. But going back to these wicked problems, I mean, as it stands now, Mel and I were talking about, boy, we're sort of on a crash course here. We're sort of continuing with business as usual, sort of using up a finite amount of resources on a finite planet, sort of going back to what Catherine was saying. And sort of what's the plan for that? I mean, we sort of know a known unknown that we're going to either experience a collapse. But, if you add a black swan event, like an unknown, one of these wicked problems, I mean, we could really be in for it. And sometimes I just wonder if we're going to be able to make a course correction in time to sort of avert even the things that we know are coming down the pike.
Is it, can I answer or?
Yes, please.
Yes. Well, I think I agree with you. How is it? And even we could think, isn't it too late? And no, I think it's never too late. And I think humanity has faced also difficult points like this. And I'm sure we can find, but I think the solution could be one solution. I don't have the, but one solution could be what we are doing on our side at our level. I think, you know, it's like the colibri metaphor, or this metaphor that just a little piece of water is, and another one is making a huge river. It's this idea that, okay, to change the whole system, it's hard, but if we are making at our level as person, and it's the debate about selfish and altruism point, if we are choosing in our current life to reduce, maybe we don't need to buy so many things, and I'm speaking from my own too. So the choice, our daily choice, to think about how to respect this planet, how to respect all the life on this planet, and what can I do at my level. But I agree, I don't have, it's very hard. It's such a big system, and you know, maybe just trying not to reduce using a car and choosing a bike, as Ivan Illich is explaining, or walking, or yes, just like this. But it's hard. It's making first a personal change, I think.
For sure,
Okay.
and many young people, you know, with whom I counsel, you know, have these very deep existential concerns regarding, you know, what life is going to be like for them. Many people are saying, boy, I'm not going to have children. I can't bring them into this world because it looks pretty grim.
It's so
And
full,
yet I think there's a deep wisdom in what you say. You know, we can't individually affect, you know, this large modern industrial civilization as an individual. Perhaps collectively we can. But one thing I would say is, you know, if we woke up tomorrow morning and got to sort of start a new system, what would that look like? And would anyone really vote for what we have now? And what I mean to say is there are forces that are sort of keeping us locked on this path. And maybe, you know, trying to figure out a way for people to come together and address that is also part of the solution. Like you said, no snowflake thinks it's responsible for the avalanche, right? And yet avalanches happen. So it's my hope that somehow, some way, we can wake up from this malaise and make some forward progress, first individually and then collectively.
I think as teacher, several people here are like me, teaching at the universities, and I think we are facing our students are the managers from tomorrow. They are those who tomorrow will take the decisions, who will make the choice, and sharing with them and thinking with them about these challenges. I'm frequently telling to them, well, tomorrow you are the one who are, you can fight, you can think about it. Tomorrow you are the one who will make the decision. So it's my hope. But it's hard, yes.
And are you finding that the younger generations have more of an impetus, more of a desire for system change than the older generations?
Hard to say, because I would say yes for all the things in link with the food and notion of justice too. When we are speaking about, you know, this all this foreign people working for $1 per day in certain countries, or even children working for $1, working first and then for $1 a day to produce what we are buying at a very low price. They have a concern about it, and they are able to say no, I don't buy this, or I'm changing my style of fooding. I'm choosing organic food, and I prefer buying less because it's sometimes more expensive to buy organic food. I prefer buying less, but there's quality, and for the defense, I would say, of local farmers and thinking local for this when they are buying too.
I want to build, Katrine, I want to stop you and I want to build on what you're saying, but I also want to redirect a question to Henri or Veronique, and it's also links to your question, Patrick. If we think that capitalism is not the right way to go, can we even hypothesize what would be the next formation? And I think probably Henri has the answer, or Veronique. What would be the next formation if capitalism ran out its function, stopped being functional? And I see Veronique has unmuted herself.
Good question, yes. That's interesting.
We explained in the book called Socially Responsible Capitalism that there are two kinds of capitalism. There is a financial capitalism and what we call the socially responsible capitalism, that is to say, the economic model of capitalism can be, is compatible with socio-economic development. That is to say, social development, ecological development, and economical development. And personally, I don't have any other answer to this question, but I don't know if you want to add something. No? So we are working in this way of socially responsible capitalism.
And actually, oh, sorry, Hala.
I just kind of trying, so it's still a capitalism, it's just a different focus. It just changes its focus, that's correct?
Yes, and also the share of the value added, and it's very important, huh? This aspect. What is the periodically negotiable activity contracts? It's a tool to share the value, the additional value added created through SIM processes. And that is to say, when we succeed, when a company succeeds to convert part of its hidden costs into value added, the additional value added created can be shared between the different parts, stakeholders of the company, and including employees, managers, and clients in some cases. And we apply this in the French Post. How can we, a post office, the French post office, how can the additional value added can be shared with the clients, with the staff, with employees, and with the organization. In this case, it was a public organization in order to finance its development.
Thank you. That was a great discussion. I think I know we want now, finally we get a little bit loose and we want to keep talking, but we have a 15-minute break and we still can catch up and add our comments either on chat or in the two discussions that are following. We meet at Minnesota would be 11 a.m. So please adjust your time zone, both in actually 14 minutes. We come back here again. Thank you to all presenters and experts from the session one. It's 11 a.m. and so we are starting our second session. And I want to introduce the another moderator, Cheryl Throckmorton, and she joins us today from St. Louis, Missouri. She works for the National Council for Mental Wellbeing and teaches for the Webster College. Welcome, Cheryl, and take over, please.
All right, thank you, Ala. I am happy to get this started, and I'm excited that our first segment in this session 2 is going to continue to focus on love, hope, and resilience. And I'm happy that Ala is going to take on presenter mode with John. We know John and Ala, they co-lead. John is president of the SEAM Institute, a consulting company that we know focuses on SEAM consulting, and Ala is co-director. And we are thrilled to have you kick this off. And the first group of presenters did so well keeping to the time. I'm going to set my timer for 7 minutes because I'm confident everyone's going to finish in time. And if you finish in time, you won't hear it. If you're at 7 minutes, you will hear the chime, and just try to gracefully wrap up your point. So take it away, Ala and John.
I'm going to do the talking and Ala's going to do the technical work.
Teamwork.
Okay. We want to talk today about love in the workplace. And I think that's important because we've been talking about management, I think from a different language, we're talking about a spiritual crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So let us first define love, since it has several meanings. In 1971, C.S. Lewis identified 4 types of love: affection, friendship, romantic love, and charity. Today, we talk about charity. That's our focus. Unfortunately, the word charity in English has lost its power. Originally, charity meant the unconditional acceptance and caring for another person. Acceptance no matter what. Just to clarify, charity is not permissiveness. Charity includes boundaries and refusal to accept bad behavior, but never does it include rejecting the person. Charity, caritas in Latin, agape in Greek, is the divine love. And it's the most powerful change agent I know. When we are born, we are loved unconditionally just because we are. We do not notice how and when this unconditional love turns into a bargaining game. I would love you if you do what I expect you to do. This is conditional love. And deep down, we know that conditional acceptance is not really love. But most of us learn to pretend that conditional love really is love. When we forget what charity is, we forget how to be whole, and we forget how to love and accept a whole person unconditionally. We develop a profound case of amnesia. We transfer this amnesia to the modern workplace. Modern organizations do not remember that organizations have 2 sides, economic and socio, as all of us at this conference know. As a result, for many managers, the socio does not matter. Employees, ultimately, for them, do not matter, except as tools to serve the organization. And when employees are no longer useful, they can be discarded like an old tissue. The scary part here is that such attitude is perceived as business as usual. How many employees, when they're being fired, are told, this is not personal, this is just business? For the employee, it is profoundly personal. For many people, the workplace starts with their manager. When we look at how managers behave, we see most are playing the bargaining game. I accept you if you do what I tell you. I accept you if you're being productive. I accept you if you're being obedient. Their acceptance is conditional. It is not love and respect of the whole person. Eventually, the conditional acceptance turns into lack of caring, or in other words, indifference, which is the opposite of love. Indifference leads to violence. Obey or else. The threat is hidden, but it's there. And when managers are indifferent, people learn to be afraid. Management based on fear is the most common management style that we have experienced. According to socioeconomic theory, management based on fear is the result of the TFW virus. The managerial behaviors include not listening to employees, not respecting employees' expertise, not valuing the person, only the work. When there is a problem, the employee is blamed. This is conditional love at work. The attitude is highly disrespectful of employees, although it is disguised as good business. Usually employees can feel the disrespect, at some level at least. And this respect is, we suggest, why 2/3 of American employees are either only partly engaged or fully disengaged at work. In organizations that operate by socioeconomic principles, managers' behavior is rooted in unconditional love. I think that's the heart of SEAM, valuing the worth of each person no matter what. What does it look like? Accepting that employees are intelligent and worth listening to. Expecting employees' expertise so when change are needed, employees are included in the organizational change process. Accepting that most people want to do meaningful work. So when there is a problem, the goal is to understand the cause of the problem. If the cause is the system, then fix the system. If the cause is the employee does not have such sufficient resources, such as time or materials or skills, then help the employee gain the resources. Don't blame them. Acceptance, the last condition, acceptance of the need to treat employees holistically, not pretending that work and home do not overlap. Management based on love leads to several outcomes. Loyal employees, reducing the high cost of turnover, more creative employees. For instance, in the modern workplace, complexity has led to the need to be creative in new ways. Part of being human is the need to grow rather than remain stagnant. When we stop growing, we die a bit. Management love looks to help people grow, to develop their human potential because people need this. A very nice side effect is developing human potential also adds value to the organization. To summarize, we live in a world in which the accepted purpose of business is to make a profit. Such an attitude is deeply disrespectful and can destroy the security of employees, the souls of managers who behave inhumanely, the profitability of organizations, and our entire world. Socioeconomic theory posits that the human being is important and deserves to be treated with love. This is so fundamental, it should be obvious. But for many, love in the workplace is a foreign concept.
Thank you so much, John and Ala. Great driving, Ala.
Yes. She's steering.
All right. Next, we have Sarah Skillman, who is co-founder of the Liminal Edge that has been focusing on developing human potential in Fortune 100 companies for over 20 years. SEAM has become her work and life philosophy since 2019. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Give me a moment to share here.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. I'm very excited to join you today and share some things I've learned about hope, its power, and the changes I've observed in organizations where hope is the energy of change. So what is hope? Snyder defines it as the perceived capability to derive pathways to desired goals and motivate oneself via agency thinking to use those pathways. As the definition implies, hope integrates agency and pathway thinking. As I dug deeper, I found that hope, as Brene Brown summed up, it's not a warm, fuzzy emotion. She supports Snyder's earlier work where hope is a way of thinking, with feelings playing a secondary role. STEAM explores the pathways to help people reach individual and collective goals. People uncover vast possibilities together and believe they can create a better future, remaining resilient even when things aren't working as well as they could be. Hope is critical in STEAM work. At times, we intervener researchers uncover those feelings that are not said, and we help voice things that must be heard. So what is power? It's the ability to act or produce an effect, a source or means of supplying energy. In STEAM, actors have the ability to make change. Hope can be a source of energy to create a better future. As we coach through interventions, we observe a shift in thinking as people explored pathways to their goals. For example, in our first month, we would hear things like, I don't own my own schedule. My time belongs to the company. This is the first time in 7 years someone has asked me my opinion. We are the lint rollers of the organization. In month 7, we started hearing things like, I negotiated for my personal and departmental needs. This saved us $500,000 a year. Thank you. I'm no longer afraid to share my ideas. How would I have this conversation with my entire team? I want to hear everyone's ideas. Now that we've cleared dysfunctions, we have time to meet with team members. And as Brene Brown pointed out in her recent book, The Atlas of the Heart, hope is a function of struggle. We develop hope not during the easy or comfortable times, but through adversity and discomfort. Sometimes complexity is treated as an opponent we must defeat. However, multiple connections and interactions between complex adaptive systems create endless possibilities of pathways to solutions. Some we don't even have the capacity to understand yet. Complexity is not something to control or manage. Embracing complexity with hope opens our heads, hearts, and hands to many possibilities. So we've talked a bit about culture with beer-based thinking. What we see is employees are treated and measured like machines. Employees put organizational needs ahead of their own. Employees are expected to obey and normalize heartless processes. Employees are disengaged. It's a blind acceptance, which, while hope is not an emotion, hopelessness is. Hopelessness arises out of a combination of negative events and negative thought patterns, particularly self-blame and the perceived inability to change our circumstances. And that's the beauty of STEAM. We help people see those pathways to change their circumstances. Here's how you know you've got hope in the system. People are treated with love. People can negotiate for personal and organizational needs. People are included, cooperating to respond to change. And people are the source of value for the org. They experience joy in life, which includes work. The larger system presents itself differently, as you can see. STEAM helps to manifest hope and is a powerful source of energy in the midst of complexity and organizational change. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great on timing. All right, our final presentation, rounding out this 3 presentations on love, hope, is one on resilience. And we have Sofia Opatska, who is the Vice Rector of Academic Affairs of the Ukrainian Catholic University. Welcome, Sofia.
Hello, everyone. I'm just trying, can you see my screen?
We can. And you were momentarily in
Yes,
presentation mode.
I will try, but I'm not sure I can.
There you go.
Control my, yeah, but okay. It looks like I cannot control my screen then.
I think if you go
Okay.
down to the lower left, you'll see some advancing, like you might see an arrow where you can make it forward.
Yeah, I cannot.
Or you can do it from this too. So
Yeah, I would appreciate if I
away.
can.
Yeah,
That would be
absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm Sofia Opatska. I'm Ukrainian, and that's my superpower right now. Not only because today is the Vyshyvanka Day, which I wear right now, it's a day of national clothes. And not only because we impressed the whole world over the last 10 weeks, but also because we are on a very steep learning curve. And right now as a country and as organizations and as every individual. And I would like to share some of this learning with you and by unfolding the words in the topic of my presentation. So let me start with personal resilience. This is how the resilience looks like for me right now. That's a professor of Uzhhorod National University, Fedor Shandor, who volunteered to fight for the country, but at the same time, at the free time on the front line, he's teaching. So he did not forget what's his purpose and why he's fighting indeed. And he is saying that he's doing that also because we need more smart people in the country. If you talk about turbulence, I'm sure that everyone feels the turbulence in the recent years, especially. But for us, Ukrainians, it is much more than inconvenience in online work or teaching. It's much more than uncertainty for the companies about future markets. For us, turbulence means to hold the world at the moment, and to know that almost the whole world is relying, on what is going on in our country and how strong we are. For us, turbulence, it's when you don't really know if tomorrow will come, and when it comes, we know it will be different one than today. And when you can receive overnight more than 100 different messages about events and changes in your own country. For us, turbulence is also the time when you don't really think that there is gray. It's when you believe in black and white because you believe in truth. The truth is the truth and lie is a lie. And we also know that changes happen for everyone, but for us, they happen with nano speed. So what did we learn about organizational resilience in those times? Well, first of all, resilience is much more than a short-term heroism and adrenaline. We all got the adrenaline in first weeks after February 24th, but we know the way is much longer. And if you really want to be resilient, it requires more effort and much more resource management than just to be heroic. Second, new organizations which appear, and a lot of them appear right now in Ukraine voluntarily, require new leadership. If you can imagine that in the community of the business school, which I represent, among 500 alumni, around 60 volunteering initiatives started in the first week of war. You cannot apply traditional top-down leadership and management model in the community of 500 people starting 60 initiatives and involving many more people. Third, when nothing is clear, what might happen next day, not to say in the months, and when you have to change everything in your organization from location to business model, one thing that can keep you focused on the most important is the purpose of your organization. And that's what we are talking with all business people right now in Ukraine. So what's the purpose of your organization? Fourth, the difficult situation unexpectedly can bring the best in people. And for Ukrainians as a country, as well as organizations, humans started to become the center. And that's probably the best thing we are learning about ourselves, that we can put human being in the middle. And the last thing I would like to mention as well about hope, about which the previous presentation was. I recently had a meeting with young people in Denmark, where I stay right now, and it's in one of the business schools, and I was sharing about Ukraine, and I have been asked, do you have hope in such difficult times? And I said, of course, we have much more hope than we had before probably war, because in difficult times, we do things one would never expect to be able to do. So no matter how challenging the situation is, we have and keep hope for the day, for a week, and for the future. And I also think we give a lot of hope to many people right now in the world. So just imagine how the world would already look like if we did not have hope and if we surrendered. So this is all I would like to say at the moment, and I would be more than glad to share many more things if you would like to know them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing your superpower with us and your insights. Next, that actually gave our next two experts, Bob and Mary, a lot of things to reflect on. So I'm thrilled to introduce Bob Randall. He's an assistant professor of management in the MBA program and the program MBA director at the Stender Business School at the College of St. Scholastica. And Mary Paulson, she has a doctorate degree in organization development, a master's degree in clinical social work, and a certificate in SEAM. And she combines all of this education and training in developing human potential in the workplace and classrooms. Bob and Mary, we're excited to have you kick off the debrief of these three presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're excited to be part of this. Maybe we'll just start with some initial reactions. Mary, do you want to maybe just have a few initial comments before we start engaging with some questions?
Absolutely. I want to thank our three presenters. As I sat and I listened, actually the first reflection, or what really resonated with me, were the key concepts from John and love, Sarah and hope, and what Sophia shared about purpose. And really what clicked for me was how these three can be the antidote for the TFW virus. So I do have a quick question for John. And wondering, as you spoke, I was reminded of the work of Carl Rogers, who's a humanistic psychologist back in the 50s, and his concept of unconditional positive regard. And the importance of that, not only in a clinical kind of psychodynamic context, but really within any human system. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit more on how that becomes integrated into an actual SEAM intervention and in practice within an organization.
John, you're muted. John, you're muted.
Yeah, be sure to unmute yourself.
There it is. Thank you. I think Rogers is talking about charity, as I was talking about it. Love, unconditional love. When you think about a SEAM intervention, or any intervention, the goal is to change things, and people don't like to change if they're comfortable. And I think usually it takes some kind of crisis. I hope not a war, as Sophia is discovering, may be creating a spiritual revolution. In a company, I think what happens is the change comes with the feedback from the SEAM intervention and from the learning about management tools, which causes managers to think differently. But while the long-term goal will, I think, help people discover that it works to have unconditional love. They don't trust words. They have to experience that before they trust it. And that's, I think, what the SEAM process does. So the goal on one hand is to help people learn to live that way. I think some people do, but their organizations don't allow them to live it out. And some people are blinded by the virus. I think you have a few mean people, and you have a few people who want to live with unconditional love and have that rare company that allows them to. Last piece, I think the intervener researcher has to treat the people they're working with unconditional love. That acceptance that you're doing the very best you can. We're here to help you. The moment there's judgment, people snap back. So.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was struck by all of the presentations as well. And I'd like to see, Sophia, if you'd be willing to just share the, I would imagine, roller coaster of emotions that you're going through as you flee your homeland and think about maybe potentially going back someday and the uncertainty. It's great to know that you've sustained hope throughout all of this, but just if you could give us more insight into that, if you'd be willing to share that, I think that would be really interesting for all of us to hear more from you.
Well, let me assure you that everyone who left Ukraine because of war, people are really looking forward to go back. I can even say you more that some of my students, for example, who considered going abroad, for longer period of time, now they're saying we will go maybe just for a semester, very quickly, and we will go back because we have a country to rebuild. And for example, another example of why people have huge hope, how much there are intellectual discussions about rebuilding country, but not only rebuilding, but rethinking the country. So in a way, I would like to say that hope, it's very practical thing. I agree, that it's not emotional thing. Emotionally, I lose hope very often. I feel down, I feel upset, I feel angry, I lose hope very emotionally very often. But practically, I think that's probably again the moment when practically people really are focused. I know it will be again difficult to sustain because I think hope, like resilience, this is something difficult to keep in a very long period of time. But somehow you have to find hope in beautiful things. And no matter how disgusting and terrible this war is, we are finding a lot of nice things and a lot of humor. Actually, we have humor. Nobody believes that Ukrainians can keep spirit and humor. And we have one of our graduates. She posts every day, funny memes on the Instagram. So I send to my parents from time to time to cheer them up.
Wonderful. And I had a follow-up question for Sarah as well. John alluded to this, and Sophia certainly talked about it as experiencing disruption and how that can create hope and, opening up minds for the future and creating a new future. And I'm wondering, in a more stable system, the organizations that you work in, and how you create that disruption that then can lead to hope. If you see the process playing out that way.
I'll say that an example of that is when the mirror effect, you can start to see it happen where some of the discussion is, I thought I was the only one experiencing this, but I'm not alone in those thoughts. And us working through, and sometimes later in the expert opinion where we share that some of these things just aren't normal. They've accepted them, and that becomes the catalyst that like we can address these issues and we can do it together. So it's the shared experience that they have during interventions that lays the foundation for that work.
Great, thank you.
May I add something? I think hope is also, to have hope, you also need to go through the process of reflection. So at the moment, for example, for us, as I mentioned, so many things happen. You know, we are every single day, it's like a new, you know, the new year, new world for us. And we, in the university, we realized that we need to go through very deep and active reflection, and we need to help our students to go through that. And that helps you to get this hope and to get this future thinking. I think that's important.
Thank you, Sophia. There is a question in our chat right now for you, Sophia, if it's okay, I can read it aloud. How do you see applying SEAM to help our people during this period of tough time? Your people.
For me, questions how are the most difficult at the moment, you know, because I think we are still, you know, going through the stages of why, and how is very often we don't know how, but because again, this reflections is taking place every single day, you know, and huge changes. But I think it's very, for Ukrainians, it's very, we have very positive ground to apply this approach, because as I have mentioned, the human started to become in the center. I actually hope that in our new Ukraine, the human being will be in the center, and rethinking of Ukraine and rebuilding of Ukraine as a country will keep the human in the center. So I believe you can apply it very literally to the country, to any organization, because I can say that Ukrainian business organizations are also going through very difficult times. And I know some bad examples when people were fired on the February 24th because companies just closed down. But I know so many business people who keep their employees very often with their, you know, markets and businesses like 70-80% down, sometimes 100% down, but they keep people and they try to think how they can, you know, how can they start from the scratch. And I think in a way, from cultural perspective, I think we are a very good place to apply, you know, socioeconomic approach to management at the moment.
Thank you, Sophia. There's some follow-up comments as well, it sounds like, which are very much in line with what you were just, with what you were saying. I actually, as I was listening to what came to mind for me, you had mentioned the opportunity and the importance of reflection. And I would add even contemplation. And I'm really curious, and this is for both Sophia, for John, and actually for Sarah as well, when it comes to hope, and how maybe we see that in the midst of turbulence, and I heard actually during the break some conversation about post-traumatic growth. And while we're still amidst the turbulence, how do we create that opportunity for reflection and contemplation, and or how does that fit into the SEAM process? Maybe Sophia, do you want to comment on how reflection can fit into this during turbulent times? And then maybe we can expand it to how reflection fits into the SEAM intervention process.
Yeah, so it's always a matter of human to human conversation. So my students, for example, they are in very different parts of the world right now, but they really appreciated that the university was teaching online, that they can get together, that we have been discussing not what we planned, but what was important for them, for the country, and for us to talk about. So I think in that way, if we think about university, business school, or any educational or training institution, we cannot stick with the plan. When it's a huge disruption, we have to be able to change the plan and just simply to talk human to human. As our president of the university, Bishop Boris, he's saying heart to heart. That's important, you know. He was recently giving commencement speech at the Notre Dame, so he asked every graduate to feel the pulse of the neighbor, just to take the hand of the neighbor and to feel the pulse. And this is how you feel the other person. Very, you know, very practical, simple act of, you know, feeling the pulse of the neighbor. And yeah, I think you just have to, you have to take time for that. We are very much in rush, and for us it's also very difficult because, I mean, we are saving country, and I can say that we are still saving huge part of the world. So, you know, so we don't have much time, but I think it's very important to take this time.
I can add, Mary, to your to the answer. The best reflection ever happens when you face something you don't like. In terms of Ukrainian war, it's people face the situation they don't like, the war. In terms of SEAM, people are presented with a mirror effect in where intervening researchers shows the summary of all dysfunctions in organizations. And when people are hit with something they didn't want to see or didn't expect, etc., that's where the reflection comes. Because how often do you reflect when you're in the flow? You're in the flow, you're enjoying life. But you are reflecting when you hit between the eyes, you know, and then, wow, why, as Sophia said, why did it happen? What I'm missing, what I have missed. And that opens up a totally like a different path for thinking through situations, environment, etc., etc. So that's where they're similar.
There's another piece, and that is time, I think. That reflection doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. And the SEAM intervention deliberately is slow, so people have time to reflect. The other thing I think is that interaction Sophia talks about, which Dave Swinson is going to talk about next, is based on, I think it's based on love. It's based on not feeling judged, but accepting the other person as they are. And if that's what's happening with your students, that's actually a rare event that in and of itself is transformative, I think.
Thank you. Bob?
Sarah, were you going to add something? I saw you on mute. I just wanted to see if there was something you wanted to add.
I do. What occurred to me is maybe I didn't spend as much time on this, but as I was working on this, just the idea of complexity and that it's something that we have to wrestle with, and sometimes it's just like there's too much complexity. That's actually if you have hope, it's a gift because there's so many more pathways to explore. It doesn't have to be something to be defeated. Complexity helps you explore more possibilities.
Thank you. I was going to add just something for any of the speakers around psychological safety, particularly when it came to the discussion on love. It reminded me of inclusion safety that Timothy Clark talked about in his 4 Stages of Psychological Safety book that came out about 2 years ago. And I was just wondering, in your SEAM interventions, in your interactions around change, particularly for people that haven't felt psychologically safe, if there's some intentionality, if there's some processes, if there's some practical tips that you have to build a foundation for psychological safety, so those people that haven't been participating actually lean in and feel trusted or included enough to participate in the change process.
I think that's where The intervener creates that by relationship. If you come in and people perceive that you're not judging, that you care about them as people and want to let them develop in their way, not in your way, that creates a place of safety. And I run into so many people who never have that. They always feel judged.
And I think it's particularly important for those that are in the manager role, that they don't feel judged, that this is something that they're leading and working on with their team. What my experience has been, a lot of the people in management roles are extremely hard on themselves after they, when we're in a coaching session, after they've heard some of the things that were brought forth in the mirror effect. And it is respecting them, treating them with love, and helping them see pathways forward, and that there's hope again, so that they don't shy away from the turbulence.
I just realized something. You know, lack of love. If we don't love a person, it gives a license to do awful things. In the workplace, if we don't love the person that we manage or who works, we perceive as a cog, and it's easier to misuse or manipulate the person. In the battlefield, if we don't love the people, it's easier to kill them. And that's why the two sides killing each other, because they don't treat those as humans, but as something that doesn't have a human features. So it's easier to kill. So that's the parallel I see between the war and the workplace. And if we come with love, it's harder for us to do something awful to a human being.
And so often managers do that. They do awful things.
Because they don't see a human being in front of them. They see something, a cog or who knows what they see.
Yeah, and in the chat, somebody just mentioned the language around that as well. People being referred to as resources or something other than people. So I think that resonates. Mahmoud, I see your hands up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, a quick one to John and Ala. I mean, John specifically. I am soaked in SEAM. You know that I love it. I love the human part about it. But in reality, I'm practicing today as a chairman of a board, and it's taking me longer than it should to try to help some of the board members. So how much do you extend the love? How much do you wait? Because the organization has to move on.
I think this is where Pierre's answer is helpful. You have to sense it. You have to find balance between accepting them as they are and helping them see that they might be different. And I think every group is different like that. So no magical answer, Mahmoud.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I think it's time to move on. We've got 4 additional presentations to conclude our session today. John already queued up Dave Swenson's presentation. And Dave, thanks for the commentary. You've added a lot of great insights already in the chat. Dave Swenson is professor of management at the College of St. Scholastica in the I'm tongue-tied. Director of MBA in Rural Health, and also an interesting fact, he's also a forensic psychologist. So Dave, welcome. And we're ready for your presentation. Where did you go?
He dropped, yeah.
He was here and very active. How about shall we go on to the next one?
Absolutely.
And we welcome
Absolutely,
to present?
yes. Mhm.
All right, so we're going to move to Mark Bonet. who is an intervener researcher with ICOR and professor in the business school at the University of Jean Moulin in Lyon, France. Welcome, Mark. It's great to hear from you again at this 10th annual conference.
Thank you, Cheryl, and honored to present on behalf of Luis Bueno. So 1 second, can you see my screen and PowerPoint?
Yes.
So Luis Bueno has just defended his PhD dissertation, drawing on an intervention research in small business. He was the managing director as well. And he experienced a very, well, it makes me think of the resilience we mentioned a moment ago, because he experienced a dire situation with all but going out of business due to perhaps arson fire in one of the work of the workshops. And it was a company designing and producing furniture. So the theme of dissertation, I was a supervisor, and he was originated from Peru, Latin America, and then moved to France and team working with that company for a while, for 5 years. And the theme of the dissertation was about small businesses in great economic difficulties, deploying a quality management system according to SEAM. So, sorry, moving on to the one second. So the problem we faced, and like many other SMEs, they are facing increasing complexity while they are not equipped with enough staff, enough support to deal with such challenges. So they can't afford being equipped with admin staff to cope with those constraints, and in particular, due to the increasing number of norms and standards that has been described by Henri Saval and Véronique Zade in the TITRA normalization theory. So among all these norms, one becoming mandatory is the ISO 9000, because of the pressure put by the customers in the customer supplier relationship, and being subcontractors oftentimes. So it results in increased cost, while profit margin is very low, and it's not sustainable for many companies, and in particular small companies that are taken over by larger ones. And SEAM, it could demonstrate through intervention research that SEAM could provide solution for resilience and to transform these constraints into opportunities. And the core hypothesis consists in building up a strategic bedrock consisting of the quality of management, as opposed to reacting or adapting to the norms. No, first dealing with let's say the cracks in the bedrock, which go by the name of dysfunctions and hidden cost. So such an approach had been already experimented by the ISIOR Center in lot of small businesses, but the dissertation was aimed at formalizing and the body of information through this 9-employee company and implementing this system. So the intervention consisted in enhancing the quality of strategic steering in the context of complexity. So you have the accreditations requiring to strengthen what we call the infrastructure, that is to say invisible managerial infrastructure of the company, and strengthening what is called the strategic bedrock, enabling the company to be more resilient and to integrate a complex number of, a large number of standards and norms, and including what appears on the on the right-hand side of the slide, the management standards. So through the implementation of socioeconomic tools and processes, it led the company to be more proactive in terms of managerial innovation, integral quality, as opposed to quite usual total quality, the strategic bedrock, and transforming hidden cost into performance. So you have the comparison between both systems. On the left, the superstructure, while strategic bedrock is not so much visible. It's the underlying system that enables this proactivity of this small company. So the company, experienced so many. It was in the red due to the fire. They lost some clients because difficulties to meet the deadlines for delivering the products, the furniture. But all of a sudden, through this the proactivity enabled by the socioeconomic bedrock, the company was very, very efficient in the accreditation, and even it was observed that the auditors promoted this approach and told the ISO accreditor, well, this company sets an example. It's a role model of the implementation of ISO 9000 because of innovative approach to implementing it. So our contribution, that is to say, the contribution to the margin has sharply increased by 23%, and conversion of hidden cost into value added, in particular, less shift in function on behalf of top management. So delegation, concerted delegation, decentralized synchronization, and so on. So in particular, in the first year, transforming 500,000 euros or dollars into value added. And very quickly, the company was back on even heels and could recover. So this was an experience formalized through the set of hypotheses in this doctoral dissertation that has to be, well, that
Thank you, Mark. I hate that I have to cut you off. I love that in this conference we get to hear these insights from our doctoral students, and it is the most difficult to get it done within 7 minutes. So thank you for presenting on behalf of Luis, and you'll have the opportunity to maybe share some additional insights in the next section of conversation. So is Dave Swenson, are you back? I introduced you already.
I am back. I apologize for the blip. I live out in the country and our power source, I think somebody forgot to feed the squirrel in that little running cage that powers the electricity out here. But I'm back, ready to go.
All right, welcome back. And there's it's storming quite badly where I am. So Ala, I'm glad you're there. Be on standby in case I lose power or something.
Absolutely, I'm here.
All right, Dave, we're ready for you when you are.
Very good. Let me share my screen. Everyone see that?
Yes. Yes.
Very good. All right. Well, in SEAM interventions, we encourage dialogue among stakeholders throughout the entire consultation process. Everybody's engaged in that. And dialogue is also a really essential skill in the development of our own understanding of the client and the whole OD process. And I'd like to overview the use of what is called emergent dialogue for developing our professional skills and our OD interventions. So I'll briefly explain how we're, in a sense, neurologically hardwired to mistakenly think about simple solutions to complex problems. Several other presenters have talked about complexity, and I think that's really something we don't consider often enough in OD. And when we don't do that, then we find some unintended consequences, often of well-intended interventions. So it's well established too that we're cognitively processing a huge amount of information unconsciously, and during our interactions, that can have a biasing effect. It can also lead to insights and also contribute to creativity. So we ought to pay attention to that tacit, unconscious process. And I'll describe how emergent dialogue works to accomplish this awareness and increase our understanding of systems. Now, there's a lot of information on the slides. I'm going to be going through those quickly, as all of us have. So let me know questions that you might have in our discussion, and you can read the content on the dialogues, perhaps in your handouts. There we go. We really are wired neurologically to look at things pretty simplistically and on the basis of habit. We simplify the understanding of our experiences, and every millisecond we're getting millions of bits of information. We can't manage that consciously. So what happens is when we act on our current understanding, often there are unintended consequences for that. Even when we define simple problems, probably they're simple because of the very limiting parameters that we place on them. And even though that makes sense and we have bright, motivated, well-intentioned people, if we don't understand that these simple problems reside within very complex systems that are affecting them, we may miss the boat. And as a result, what appear to be good decisions and interventions in those parameters may have unintended consequences downstream when we rigidly plan and implement and don't anticipate the interconnections of the factors that are affecting our OD process and outcome. Then somewhere down the line and over time, there may be adverse consequences to it. There can also be benefits that we don't anticipate, but then also we're not in a position to use those. I like some of the quotes that Einstein has when he suggested we really need to use a different mode of thinking than the one we use to create the problem. And we need to take more time in defining problems from different perspectives and gain a deeper understanding. Now, you might already be familiar with this conversation tree. Most of the time, and I think as consultants, we even do it, although we probably know better, we really go in and we try to sell an idea, whether it's SEAM or whether it's something else. We're trying to sell the idea rather than to withhold judgment and actively listen to a broader range of ideas that you find in true dialogue. And I think SEAM, out of any number of approaches I'm familiar with, probably does a better approach to dialogue than many others. And so the idea is to actively listen to that broader range of ideas and therefore arrive at a more thorough and a consensual conclusion. Over the last 3 years, John Conbear and I have been experimenting with emergent dialogue. And that's a variant of David Bohm, the physicist's Bohmian dialogue, in which you withhold judgment and you really deeply listen to what another person or what your client system is talking about. And what we've been discussing between the two of us, we meet anywhere from two times a month to once a month. We've been doing that for 3 years now. We have a wide range sharing of ideas that are both conscious and intuitive. We trust that what we talk about that spontaneously emerges, that's elicited by the topic we're discussing, and it's usually related to SEAM and OD, and how that will eventually become coherent for us. So the idea will start to stick together if we allow ourselves to discuss that much more openly. And that same value goes for the client system. Some of the things we talk about are pretty traditional things, sometimes consulting cases, but we also talk about some of these very common questions in OD, and the idea is to think about them in uncommon ways. Our dialogues usually share thoughts as they emerge as images and metaphors, previous cases, flashes of memories and gut feelings and so on. And as a result, we've actually generated several publications and presentations over the years on this particular topic. We also use it a lot in our consulting and our teaching. And from the literature on emergent dialogue and our own experiences, we've identified some of what we think are really useful attitudes and skills for using this dialogic approach. And you'll notice how some of these are quite different than the usual practice of accepting the client's first definition of the problem. If that's their definition, how come they're not solving it in the first place? So it may be that they really haven't defined it properly. And so quickly diagnosing the problem situation, moving to a solution, often leads to an incorrect solution. These kinds of attitudes and skills can help correct for that. This is really a model that sort of pulls it all together, and there is a lot here, but as a composite, we're really looking at, on the right-hand side, lower right quadrant, some of those unconscious processes that are always going on that reflect different aspects we're picking up on in the event. Sometimes these are impressions of nonverbal behavior in the client we're picking up on, especially when we're giving feedback to the client from the interviews we've had. There are certain unspoken themes, reading between the lines of what they're saying as well. So these may be fleeting thoughts or impressions, but they add to the dialogue and become richer. Once we talk about them in a conscious mode, then we can also take them out of the habitual and automatic and unconscious practice of them. So ultimately, there are benefits of the dialogue to the OD practitioner and also to the client systems. It's better to focus on doing things with the client system rather than doing things to the client system. And dialogue enables us to do that. So for client systems, it really ensures dialogue among stakeholders. It slows down the process, which SEAM also does, that John mentioned, and that impulse to rapidly define and fix problems and to balance both rational and tacit knowledge. And somehow I did that in 7 minutes.
That was perfect timing. I think you wrapped it up right as the chime was going off. So thank you, Dave, and hopefully your internet will stay strong.
I hope so. That's where hope comes in again.
Exactly. All right. So our next presenter is Ali Takesh, and he's a DBA student at the University of Balaman, Lebanon. Welcome, Ali.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm sharing my screen right now.
Yes, you just need to get it in presenter mode. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. So my name is Ali Takesh. I'm a DBA student at the University of Balaman and Eziyor. My intervention is in my own business, which is a family business. It is called Express Petroleum. We are a family business. We distribute all oil and gas in all over Lebanon, established in 1962. We are approximately 23 employees, and we are trying in the last 10 years to go green and to go with the sustainable energy. So as you all know, that Lebanon is facing uncertainty. So I went to something that is called proactive, and how I want to invent this proactivity in the company to face this uncertainty in Lebanon. So my title is Proactive, how the proactive personality can affect the job performance and the organizational performance. I will define those terms in a very brief way. The proactive personality, they are people who always take the initiative, who anticipate events and look for the strategic future, if you want. The job performance is a set of concrete actions aimed at the fulfillment of certain functions. The organizational performance is understood as a management process where organizational elements are integrated in order to achieve goals and objectives of the organization. The SEAM intervention proposal is to guarantee the sustainability of the business and increase sales, decrease costs, and decrease pollution. The hypothesis, the research project is based on that a proactive personality has an effect on overall job performance, which in turn influences the organizational performance. How SEAM affect the company proactivity and performance? The SEAM tools enhancing proactivity. There is a positive relationship between SEAM tools and proactivity. For example, like the time management is enhancing performance. Also, there is a very good point here where the PNAC, the PNAC, is enhancing the strategic culture. So all the employees know what they have to do in the future, and do their plans based on something. So they are increasing anyway their strategic minds. The HCVAP increased by 20% after applying SEAM tools. Employees are more strategic. We have this transformation to the innovative management also. Also for the participative management, we try to value humans more than before. There is a decentralized decision in the company. All the employees agreed with us to have a decentralized decision, so they have this power, if you want. The interviews with the employees and forced them also to participate in the solution, gave them the power to change and motivation for a good performance. The head cost is approximately $21,000 per person each year, and the same enhanced communication, quality of work, and teamwork. While to go more to the dysfunctions and the working conditions, like the dysfunctions were about trucks, how they have to improve them and update them, and update also the location, the offices, and the equipment. And those are the dysfunctions, each one by its team. Now moving to this important part for me, which I believe that there is a huge transformation in the company. This appraisal is in the accounting department. We do the 360 performance appraisal. In the first table, if you want, you can see clearly that there is there was a disagreeing from a manager that work is error-free before submitting from his subordinate. While if you move there after applying SEAM tools, which is in those dates, in the last 6 months of 2021, there is a huge difference here. People, actors, if you want, they are helping each others. There is more strategic actions because of the SEAM tools and the training on SEAM tools. There is a better communication because also of SEAM tools. They share infos more, and there is a more contribution to the team. They help define team roles, and they maximize output. And especially here, there is a higher performance from the employees. So to end up, SEAM is very beneficial, especially for family businesses and for small businesses, like in our case. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. And as Mel put in the chat, congratulations on applying this to your own organization, and congratulations on your research being completed. So well done. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.
All right. Our final presentation of the day is Mark Chenard. He joins us from Denver, Colorado. He is the Director of Agile Transformations at the Software Consulting Services of Worldwide Technology, which is based here in St. Louis. So a little connection to Worldwide Technology. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. First, thank you for having me. The example that I'm providing today, it's a case example. It's not a SEAM example, but it shows a way and some methodology that could be used in SEAM intervention. I just learned about SEAM 6 months ago, introduced to it by Brian Irwin, and so I'm very excited to be part of this group. It's really fun and exciting. So the presentation is talking about making change viral by shifting mindsets first, and do that by tapping into individuals' egos and motivations. So the problem that this client was experiencing was they were building heavy equipment machines. And very often parts of machines were built in different plants and then were assembled finally at the third plant, a different plant. And the picture there on the left is showing kind of a funny way of expressing the problem, but that's what was happening with much larger machines that could not be assembled and had to be thrown away. So big cost. So the company decided to do a research and find out what was the problem. And what they discovered is the engineers were not completing the metadata in their drawings, the CAD drawings. So they couldn't really use the planning tools, the 3D planning tools and testing tools that they had. It was a new system that they were putting in place. And just like many organizations, they discovered the problem. They defined a solution, which was we need to communicate and train our engineers. So they will complete their drawings and everything should be fine. So they, 5 different groups within the organization started to do communications and training to better use the tool. So what happens is the solution that the company was using was working within the system. So trying to communicate or change through training people, or even sometimes process change, but in that case was more training. So by doing that, you're not changing the system that causes the problem, you're just trying to influence the system. It didn't work. After a year of trying these 5 different groups, the problem hadn't changed. So that's where an emergent-based approach was brought in. I brought that into this client and work with the 5 groups to help define a new approach that was going to move into the mental models first and then change the way we were working. So a good representation of this is using the power of desire lines. Desire lines is a urban planning term that says that people will take the easiest path for them. You can see on this picture, even though there's a nice road that is all well made, there's a faster way to get to where people want to go, so they just cut across the lawn. we see that in organizations too. People will follow the path of least resistance for them, either a physical path, emotional path, mental path, habitual path. And so that's what we're working against when we're trying to make changes by changing a process. So what we found is behavior change will fail when the new process is misaligned with the stakeholders' desire lines. So the before desire line, so the picture, what they were trying to do in the case of this client is, if you look at the middle here, they were trying to make the engineers add more data to their drawings. And so they were using training and communication, but what they had working against them in terms of desire lines is they had a productivity pressure loop that was the engineers were judged on the quantity of drawings they were able to put out as opposed to the quality. And so in order to meet their productivity goals, they could not spend more time on the drawing. So their choice was, I don't want to get in trouble. That's my easy path. So I'll produce the drawing and I won't worry about the metadata. The other path, the bottom one, that was also reinforcing the lack of change was they were already working full-time and they didn't have extra time and didn't want to put extra time to learn the new way of doing things. And even if they learned it, they didn't have the time to use it because it would affect their productivity. So this system was based on external pressures that were not aligned with the desired behaviors. So what we did, we focused as a group on let's change that and work on the mental models and create an internal structure for change that will then start to work on its own. We called it be a Da Vinci, not a Picasso. So all engineers want to be Da Vinci's, not Picasso. Those are self-portrait of the two artists. And what it looked like for them is if you're doing the thing on the right, do all the full, on the left, you do the full data, you will have created a Da Vinci. If you do the piece on the right, you'll have created a Picasso. So engineers all want to be Da Vinci's. They want to do a good job. And so by tapping into this and saying, if you don't do the back end of your drawing, the metadata, you're actually being a Picasso with your drawings. And in the opposite is because they want to be good engineers, they found the time to learn the metadata. So when we started using that, moving from external pressure to internal motivations by using a meme type approach and providing a picture of what looks good, we ended up really changing the organization, and the change started happening on its own. The engineers were now equipped to be able to stand up to their leaders and say, what do you want? You want me to stop creating problems down the road, but you keep judging me on the piece that is not helping with the problem. And I want to do a good job. So it really changed the way they interacted, and it created a new dialogue. So an emergent dialogue emerging of change. And I think I'm out of time already.
Thank you so much, Mark. Right.
Thank you.
A lot of really thought-provoking presentations today. Let me invite Mary and Bob to make some comments, and we'll focus on these last section, but we will open it up to everyone to comment on any and all things after we debrief these last few. So.
Great. Thank you all for your presentations. Some really practical interventions that we can all learn from these case studies, I think. I'm going to kind of start with a question that started in the chat with Ali, if that's okay. Ali, there was a question in the chat about noticing that the metric around good listening did not improve from before and after. And I think there's some curiosity around how that translated into other benefits or other challenges that you had in your particular intervention within your family company.
Just to begin with the listening part, while there is no change in that he is a good listener, this is a small example of one of our employees, and as I already mentioned that we use that 360 appraisal performance appraisal. So this is a small example of all the examples, and there is no accurate, if you want, accurate answer, correct answer, because when you are in the field, the theme does not go like what you have and what you learned. So always there is a difference between what you have in the themes and what you have on the floor, what you practice. So that was, I think, the problem, and I think this employee believed in himself that he is a good listener and he knows everything. So this is also a problem in this case.
Great. I have one other question for you, Ali. Could you explain a little more about the term proactive personality and what that means and how that plays into the change process?
Of course, and the change management, there is always you have to adapt to change. The only constant is change, so we have always to adapt to it. So when you have this proactivity, this strategic culture in the company, so you put plans and you know what will happen in 5 years. I will or in 1 or 2 years. An example, in the HR department, if you see in the analysis that there is someone who is always late to his work, or he have a high absenteeism rate, so directly you will know that this person will leave or will have a low performance. So directly you go and you train someone to replace him, or you give him a retention plan, because there is a problem, a real problem, because of the analysis of his absenteeism. This process, you can call it a proactivity. This is strategic thinking.
Oh, that's a great example. Thank you. That really clears it up for me. Wonderful case study. Thank you. And I'll flip things over to Mary if you want to take the next comments and questions.
Thank you. And I think this may somewhat lead into a quick connection and kind of bringing things to Dave Swenson and opportunities with emergent dialogue. First and foremost, as you were speaking, Dave, I couldn't help but make a connection to Sophia's words with the question of reflection and contemplation, and how does it even happen, particularly during turbulent times. And she talked about the human to human conversation. So that was key. It also brought to mind, as you spoke, the work of Mary Parker Follett 100 years ago. So she was a social worker turned management consultant, and is actually coined mother of modern management, although not many people have heard of her work. But she used the language power with versus power over with teams and organizations. And that was really something I was, getting from your talk, and the power of emergent dialogue and how we walk alongside. With that, I'm really curious if you can comment a little bit in terms of how you see, and this could actually be expanded to some of our other presenters, how do we see dialogue and emergent dialogue fitting into an intervention process or a scene process, and where and when that might happen?
Yeah, well, as John and I have explored that, I think throughout the entire process, dialogue is important, also engaging stakeholders at every possible stage. As soon as we think we have the answer, a snapshot and understanding, we've already missed the point, because things change all the time. We have to monitor that. I think dialogue is difficult for some people because they want to have quick answers. They want to have high certainty. A lot of people are simply uncomfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. And so they latch onto what makes sense. They find enough social agreement. They come to that's the conclusion and let's jump with it. I'm a forensic psychologist. I work with healthcare. I work with human service systems. And when I work with physicians, essentially they're saying, I need just the information to make the diagnosis. Once I have the diagnosis, now we're going to jump to the treatment. And in many cases, they'll again give medication to the patient who doesn't necessarily feel that their condition has been understood at all. And in one study, the Mayo Clinic found that 80% of the diagnoses that came in were re-diagnosed as something else. So I think whether it's in healthcare or whether it's in OD or whether it's any other situation where we're problem solving, we jump to it too quickly. So we have to make, I think the last presentation was really interesting, where the idea is that we need to take more time understanding what the outcome is, that being more proactive and having people not feel rushed and hurried. When we feel rushed and hurried, or when we're under stress or crisis, we rush to contain and mitigate, as I mentioned in one of my comments. That simply creates the greater likelihood that downstream we're going to have an unintended consequence. And so you have honest, bright, motivated, well-intentioned people coming up with solutions that don't work much of the time because they haven't considered those complexity and systemic consequences of it. Long answer to your short question. And we need to talk about that more. We need to recognize that solutions come from understanding the situation we're in, not jumping too quickly to solve it. The solution often becomes the next problem.
Thank you, Dave. It reminds me of one of the first things said by John or Alla when we began our OD doctor program, go slow to go fast.
That's right.
And I wanted to open up and see if anybody else, any other presenters or others who may want to continue this exploration or have something to add.
Just to clarify, Mary, what you're saying, you're opening a discussion now to anybody who wants to, beyond the presenters and experts.
Sure. I wanted to expand it, wondering if any of our other presenters wanted to also make that connection and answer it. Thank you for clarifying, Alla.
Yes, just wasn't sure what you're suggesting. So let's first ask the presenters of the day, and then we'll open to the audience.
I can jump in since David just mentioned the work that we did. So in the case of this change that was done by the employee, what I presented, the interesting part was, yes, all the solutions were making the problem worse because they were within the system. But as soon as we started working with the team of engineers and they started to look at their work differently, the change started happening naturally. And the engineers started recruiting other engineers to make it happen faster and better. And so what happens in terms of growth of change within this period was we started with about 5 people. We designed this campaign. I was just a facilitator challenging their thinking. And then a week later, we were 12. And then a month later, we were 40 working the campaign. And it was individuals that were in their jobs. They would come in at 7 a.m. in the morning, leaving at 3 in the afternoon, and never really working outside hours, not super motivated. This group started working weekends, after hours, buying websites in order to be able to create everything that was needed, started to learn Photoshop to make the posters. And so when you tap into that inner structure of motivation and ego, things start to really make a difference because they're much more able, people are much more able to stand up for what they're looking for and then ask for the right structure to be put in place. So if the organization doesn't change, of course, it's not going to do anything if the structure don't change. But that's a good place to get a lot more people to start working on altering the organizational structures.
It's a great example of disrupting and creating momentum for change. So thank you for that. And Mark Bonnet, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, thank you. And to answer in a way the Dave Swenson's issue regarding the jumping too quickly to the solution. In the socioeconomic intervention, we proceed the mirror effect, interviews, the diagnosis phase, and then the focus group, stepping back, taking time, slowing down the decision-making processes might look paradoxical, but it's kind of integrated training in the field of reflexivity. And what the paradox is, you slow down the decision-making process, and at the same time, it enables the company to move faster and faster. So, because they, through moving to collective intelligence and taking into account the complexity, it results in more hope and proactivity.
Like making wine, it has to age a while.
I'm sure the French would agree with that, Dave.
Dave, from your own experience, did you have an example, a nice example in which people jumped too quickly and had the wrong either solution or maybe a very interesting those consequences? How do you call them?
Yeah.
Undefined. Or...
Yeah, I won't give details. It was consulting with another college quite a while ago. There was a person who was a program director and was working in the healthcare field with human services personnel, and they all had to get vaccinated and have documentation of vaccination through a number of different problems, primarily related to a dean, a chair, program directors, and other people who were program coordinators. All that got shifted around in a period of time so that there was a delay. Students were not able to get the vaccinated documentation. The person who was responsible for it got that responsibility too late. And so there was a review for disciplinary action. My argument in that case was that we need to understand how something happened before we look at accountability. Mm-hmm. That's not what they wanted to do. And ultimately, they made a decision of focusing exclusively on, did this person do it or not? Mm-hmm. That was the scope of the investigating committee that was doing it. Obviously, that person was unable to do it, and so they were let go. They were fired. And the outcome of that is that policy never changed. The people who were on the review team were terribly discouraged. That person nearly brought a lawsuit, and they were terribly depressed for a period of time because of what they saw as a betrayal by the system. So in a sense, they did everything right. You know, here's the scope of the problem. Here's what needs to be decided. Here's the evidence for it. But there wasn't that understanding of the dynamic factors that had led to it in the first place. And without understanding those other factors, you make what seemed like the right decision for the wrong reason with adverse consequences.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Great. I had a question again for you, Mark, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the concept of strategic bedrock. That's a term that is new to me, and I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, when building skyscraper, you need digging very deep into the soil. So oftentimes, prior to undertaking new projects, we don't take we don't take time to invest in team building, in creating the not only the external strategy, but the internal and creating coherence. And the SEAM process is aimed at enabling this basement of the strategic project. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
So it's basically old wisdom, Bob, that 80% of every project is a prep work, right? In the painting and everything. So you prepare first before you just do something. And I think traditional management likes to jump and start building rather than taking time to prep, to do a teamwork, to assess the need, to assess the problem. So it's actually, it looks like it's a theme of today's session too. Like really understand first what we are building and prep for it.
Yeah, go slow to go fast again.
That's like that Einstein quote again. If you have 20 days to solve a problem, spend the first 19 understanding it.
Yeah. Or as Abraham Lincoln said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 7 hours sharpening the axe.
Bob, I could jump in right now with another question. Actually, I have a question for, is it Mark Chenard, our other presenter, on the desire lines. That was a new out of urban planning that came into, as well as the, let's see, some talk about ego and motivation. And I'm just really curious if you can expand a little bit. I did appreciate the equipment, just some based on my previous experiment. I was trying not to jump into a Caterpillar versus Kobelco kind of conversation, but just really curious as we were listening to Henri and ego altruism, and then you touched a little bit on ego and motivation, and this might expand the conversation. That just really gives me a lot of just inquiry. I'm just feeling like I want to learn more about that. So I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit.
Yeah, I can, and please interrupt me if I'm not going in the right direction. So the desire lines concept, or applying the desire line concepts to individuals and change, came out of my research that I did for a graduate degree in psychology. And what happened is what I found is we're as individual, we're in constant change, and we often oscillate between what we really want to be versus what we feel we need to be in order not to get in trouble, or in order to get what we're looking for. So we're either running away from something or try to get towards what we want. And so in this approach to change is really understanding those two poles and finding a way to make the pole of moving towards the goal much more attractive to the individual. And by making it attractive, they can consciously make the choice to move forward and also understand when they make the other decision. And so in the case of this talk, engineers, before we created that program with them, they wanted to be Da Vinci's. They just didn't think that they could. And it was also not present in their mindset that by doing their job, they were actually going against their core values. And so by bringing that up to the surface, suddenly they had a choice to make. And it's really hard for somebody that wants to do a good job to say, I will be a Picasso engineer. It's almost an impossible choice to make. But understanding this, then they can speak up in a very different way into the system. So the conversation that emerged from that was way more powerful, because it was not a conversation around method. It was a conversation around quality, around wanting to deliver something of value that cost the company a lot of money when they're not doing it, but they're not supported internally to do that. So it really, really changed the dynamic. It actually freaked out the leadership because it went so fast. And so does that answer your question?
Yes, and it as I'm listening, I'm just it's reinforcing the concept of developing human potential with SEAM. Would anybody else like to add to that? Any of our other presenters?
It sounds like you found a leverage point. Whenever you find a leverage point, things can happen very fast. And that was really strategic in doing that. How did you find that particular leverage that works so well? Do you know?
In this case of this client, we just looked at the outcome. We started to, the question we asked when we were the group that were facing the lack of change, the first question we asked was, what does it look like today when the problem is showing up? What does it look like? And then engineers started to pull out those drawings of half-baked machines and then started to show the good ones, and we started to say, what does that look like to you guys? And we started to say, well, one looks like a Picasso. And we were started to think about, so what could be a way to quickly showcase what we are looking to change? How could we make a comparison? And we started to look at what other artists could be present, and we tried a few ones, and then at some point said, oh, no, Da Vinci is the guy. And we started to look at Da Vinci drawings that were made by hand, that were perfect renditions of 3D models with all the parts coming together. So it was a perfect representation. And then the conversation started to emerge, saying, "Oh yeah, that Da Vinci is our guy. Is done things in the past that we all aspire to do." And so that's when we started to say, okay, well, then we've created our meme. We've created the picture of what's needed. That pictures provide the impact of not doing it, and it taps into the identity, the internal identity. So it was a perfect storm.
You found a metaphor with really deep meaning for them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's marvelous.
As you spoke, it reminded me of the concept of positions and interests, and interests being those things that that drive people, and that their interest to do really good work was not being met, and they became disobedient. They didn't care anymore. They were hopeless. And all of those things are a cluster that fit together. And so in a way, the image I have was, how do we help people identify their interests and then help meet them, is what creates hope and that energy to be creative.
And is act of love. How about this? So the act of love is to helping people understand their own interests and then help them to meet those interests, rather than giving them demands. And so positions are demands. This is what you have to do, and that's kind of totally different. Yeah, that's nice. We are bridging, in the end, we start bridging the whole concept that we're voiced today during the day one.
And I think, like, meeting people with love is like, for another organization, another team, the Picasso might be the motivating metaphor over the Da Vinci. So just keeping an open mind that that with the context and the change, that the metaphor could be motivating in a different way to aim for Picasso.
Yeah, absolutely. That example is very specific to that client and that stakeholder within the client.
Yeah.
Mark, I also really liked how you shared how the system was actually reinforcing what you didn't want to happen. So the way that they were measured like machines actually created things that were unusable. So how did you explore that with them?
So that was really more of a systems thinking, mapping approach to based on what I was learning. So that's probably more my personal contribution to the team, and started to see what was the deeper cause of the problem. And then I used that as a way to create a new conversation with the 5 groups that were trying to make the change and say, here's why it's not working. Let's look for something else. And then the 2 other loops, the green ones, came out of that conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How about comments or questions, as Ala said, related to the entire day? We invite everyone's voice into the room.
This is a luxury in the online conferences. Now everybody can say something rather than typing in the chat room.
So one of the things that I would like, I really enjoyed Dave Swenson's emergent dialogue for OD conversation. I've been using a similar approach in organizational transformation, and it's so powerful. It doesn't take that much time, but it creates a complete reversal of how people approach each other and see each other when you can have those very valuable conversations. And so with clients, very often they push back, say, well, we don't have time to have a 4-hour conversation. But when they do, they come back and they realize how much time they've saved down the road, because all the misalignment on method disappears, because the team that are in dialogue suddenly get in alignment in terms of intent, and they understand each other and they know that each other have their back. So Dave continue making that more present, Dave and John also, because it's super powerful.
Let me share an exercise that I came up with just a couple, well, actually quite a few years ago. I have a colleague I work with who is very conservative and very religious, and I tend to be much more liberal and maybe not so religious. And because we were in close proximity, we'd go to coffee and lunch every day, and we'd talk about various issues. And much of the time, we would notice that we'd be saying yes, but to each other. We'd be kind of arguing, and we're very good friends. And we recognized we didn't want to argue. And so we intentionally decided that when we started to feel that rise coming up, we'd say, you know, I'm beginning to get a little defensive or agitated. Let me stop that, kind of recenter. And I want to understand how you arrived at your point. So it's that same kind of non-judgmental dialogue. And one of the things I do now, this may sound weird, but I kind of enjoy it, maybe in a masochistic way. There's a little country bar not far from where I live. I like to go there because I run into people who are anti-vaxxers, who are anti-women's rights. They're real rednecks, people that I typically would argue with. And I like to get in a position where I chat with them and ask them how they arrived at that, because it really puts a strain on me, but it helps me exercise what I believe in, which is the dialogue. I express sincerity and curiosity, and that gets me through all kinds of situations, and it keeps me humble, and it keeps me listening. And frankly, with my colleague at work, I have moved a little bit more to the right on some things because I understand things differently. He's moved a little bit more to the left on things. We still are opposites, but we're respectful opposites. And I think in conflict situations in organizations, that kind of dialogue, that kind of humble listening, the curiosity and sincerity and respect is a way for people to dislodge from the loggerheads they're in, kind of like what our Congress is stuck in now, and to really understand if we're stuck in arguing, we can't get things done. how can we get things done? And it's very much, again, I think your use of Michelangelo and Picasso was brilliant, because you found that leverage point that brought them together with a common purpose. And that's what I think we can maybe do if we don't present ourselves as experts telling people to do something, but again, asking for their expertise. How did you arrive at that? Because most people will do what makes sense to them, even if it's not accurate, even if it's wrong. And by going back and reviewing that, you can find the gaps in their thinking that produce consequences that they don't like either.
If we are to defeat any of this extreme polarization that we have today, Dave, I don't think we're going to do it without more people being willing to do what you and your friend did.
Yeah. And it's hard.
The alternative is to wait for disaster.
Yeah.
Like a war.
Or like climate change. Yeah. I think part of being a leader is having the courage to be wrong, and being able to be humble and look at what you can do differently. Because, as experts, and we are experts in our different areas, but we can't let that go to our heads. I think we have to learn from our clients as well. And that makes us approachable. That makes us on the same playing field as the people we're working with on change. And the love that you talk about, John, that's, I think, one of the, I always get moved by that, because that's something that I didn't think about quite as clearly until you and I've been talking about that. But that, having that attitude, that feeling for others, that we're kind of on the same level here. We're in the boat together. We're traveling down a river. We got to figure out where we're going, and each other's welfare is going to make it succeed. That, I think, that makes a huge difference. That's almost the foundation of all of it.
As I was doing this, I thought that the talks about love and hope are different than most of the other talks. They're foundational things that we don't usually talk about. We talk about process, how to do things. That's fascinating and it's interesting. But how often do we focus on what is love? Do I live that? I think we're, as a nation, as a world, in a huge spiritual crisis.
And the love and hope are the bedrock of any processes in which people are involved.
Or ought to be.
Exactly, they ought to be. Because everybody wants to love. We have a paradox here. Everybody wants to love, to be loved, to be loved. Everybody wants to be loved and accepted, but then they do not do this to other people. So maybe that's where we have to start from ourselves.
That the bedrock of Mark's strategic
implementation of a good work processes. I see we have 7 minutes left. So I am seeing a question from Bruce. He's asking about kind of ego and altruism. And I know that Veronique and Henri left because they are traveling to a different conference, so they're already in a train. I think they are writing and they will publish soon that thing, so we can see and read what they have. And only to add, I don't think that actor importance still stays. However, it's that manager egoism, altruism is an addition to the concepts. Whenever Henri Saval works on something, it's never to contradict, but just to add to, because as a bedrock of the thing theory is still the same, he just adds pieces. And I think every manager has to be by default reflective, whether manager is or not reflective. And I think the concept of balancing, because being egotistic or altruistic, it's a good concept for manager, but for every actor also. I hope I answered your question.
I think to add to that, I think essentially Henri is talking about we need to honor my needs and company's needs. And that if I don't get my needs met, I'm disobedient, which hurts then the company. And rather than making it either or, saying they're both important. Is that
Right.
on target, Mike? Mark Bonet, is that
think
feel on
so.
target?
Yeah, and the lever is negotiation, respecting the others, because when you talk and you discover your colleagues or your subordinates need, well, you can call it love, respect at least.
Very good.
And what I saw in his presentation is that there's a wave between over time. It didn't say it was going to be a straight line anywhere, that there's just one way to go. So that I hear you on that, it's both, but there can be times where a decision, let's just say, is made that is more for the company, but then other times it's more for, you know, the needs of the person. We want it to be both, but there are times where it flows like a wave. That was interesting to me. I want to read more.
I found that as I was listening to them, in spiritual direction, it goes self, others, God, or universe. The same thing happens in cognitive development. We focus on self, we focus on ethics and others, we focus on the universe. And I suggest that Henri needs a trihedron of ego, altruism, which is, but then a universal one. You know, it's the caring for much bigger, it's the caring for the environment rather than just the company. And those are different, and those can clash. So he needs a trihedron here.
We will talk to him next time. We will talk to him. Very good. Or Mark will convey the message to Henri. Yes, so Bruce accepted our conversation. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. We have here 35, the most dedicated people who stayed to the very end of the day one. I really appreciate your comments. I appreciate seeing your faces. It was a wonderful discussion. If you still have some questions, you can, or comments, you can say them, or if not, then you can sleep over, you know, and come back tomorrow with your questions and insights, and we will discuss it. So any last comments? No, just no, I don't see the hands. And then have a wonderful rest of the day. For somebody like Europeans, good night, because you're coming closer to your night. And tomorrow at 9 a.m. Minnesota time, we meet again for day 2 for another round of wonderful presentations and discussions. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to presenters and experts. Thank you to Eric. Appreciate your help and your kind of standby there, supporting us, and love you all. How about that? Just sending much love your way. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ready.
See everyone tomorrow.
Yeah, bye-bye. If you want Eric, maybe Eric, John, whoever is still left, we'll